أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وارزقنا فهم النبيين وحفظ المرسلين اللهم افتح إلينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته and welcome everyone inshallah our 13th session, and our topic for today will be centered around dreams, and we will also talk in brief about the Lawh al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet. So there is a certain theme that Imam al-Ghazali, Abu Hamid al-Ghazali is laying out in his in this brief text of his. So we sort of began with a generalized outward perspective of psychology, and then now he is moving into a more spiritual dimension of psychology. So we're actually going now into now the spiritual side of it, not just the psyche or the self or the soul or behaviors and traits and attributions and things like those. So he's now going into now much more depth. Now, the subject we have for discussion today is actually it's a very sophisticated, and I think in psychology is the most sophisticated, the most complex subject of study. So we're not going to go too in-depth into it. It's something that you would probably study when you are likely more at an advanced level, at a much more like a third or a fourth level in Islamic psychology. It's not something that we'll do in this introductory course, but it is part of psychology, and he has also mentioned it in here. So we'll touch on the subject a little bit. So, but we're not going to go too in-depth into the nature of the subject itself because it has its own study. We're only going to look at it from the perspective of psychology. Now, dreams, it's the biggest problem I find in this science is the problem of terms. To study this in the English language it has its merits, and then it also has its shortcomings. And its shortcomings are largely insofar as the terms are concerned, because the words themselves, they don't show an internal harmonization of the human being. They tend to segregate or partition the human being and make it look like it's something, of phenomenological thing by itself that doesn't have anything worth of its own merit, or rather, why are the lights doing this? It's so distracting. Okay. So in the Arabic terminology, it makes a lot more sense, because one thing is, if you look at the word dream and then you look at the word wakefulness, they seem to be two distinct terms, like they're separate. There's nothing connecting the two other than the fact that we experience it, like other than the fact that we humans do it. And other creatures also do it. They are awake and then they sleep. But in Arabic, the term like dreams, it's really, there's no verb as far as dreaming is concerned as a psychological state in Arabic. It's more of sleeping and then experiencing through that sleep a dream. And the dream in this case would be a ru'ya, which in the Arabic meaning of the term has to do with vision. has to do with view, has to do with like an opinion, for example, in the same root structure has to do with somebody's viewpoint on a certain subject. And it all stems from the same root word, which is ra'a, to see, right? So you see in the wakeful state, and then through that seeing, you experience a reality. And then you also see in the sleep state. And the distinction between the two has to do with the functionality of the body and its relation with the soul. So in the wakeful state, you are accessing this physical world, this material realm, and then in the sleep state, you are cut off from that material realm. And so you're still seeing, but you're not seeing through a certain filter. In the wakeful state, you're seeing through the filter of the senses, and then in the sleep state, you're seeing without that filter, but there's still a filter now. There's a filter of the soul. So the way to understand is, first of all, to understand that the human being is an existent entity. It's not the human being. We are not a non-existent entity. We are an existent entity, and we are existent in various states of existence. So primarily, we are divided into two states of existence. There's the conscious state of existence and then the unconscious state of existence. And we're not going to talk about that one. We're going to talk about the conscious state mostly. In the conscious state of existence, then you have got a wakeful state and then a dream state or a sleep state. So there's a wakeful state and the sleep state. In the wakeful state, because this is the primary purpose of your existence in this phase of your existence, is to exist in this world, this biological material world, then you have to experience this world through the vessel in which you have been given. And the only way to experience it through that vessel is to be awake. In the sleep state now, it is to cut off from that vessel and to enter or to go back into the realm from which you have come from, which is now the alam al-malakut, the spiritual realms. In the sleep state now, there are certain things that take place. There are various different states that also are you would experience in the sleep state, and that's why you have different types of dreams, different categories of dreams in the sleep state. In the early 19th century, there's a Dutch psychiatrist who sort of specialized on dreams. What was his name? Van Eden, Frederick Van Eden. He specialized primarily on dreams, and he basically came up with 7 different types of dreams. If I can recall them off the top of my head, there's the initial dreams, and then there are pathological dreams, demonical dreams. Do you know about these? No? Okay. And then general dream-like senses, and then lucid dreams. And lucid dreams, he said that lucid dreams is particularly the section that psychologists need to really focus on, because that's the real thing about dreams. Everything else is a dream-like manifestation, or a jumble up of just what the self or the mind is constructing by itself. But lucid dreams is a state in which you are experiencing a dream, but you are aware of it being a dream. And he also listed that one of the conditions of a lucid dream is to be self-aware, means to be aware of the self. And this is what I'm trying to really condense the subject in a few words. The idea of a dream is to experience the self or the soul without the filter of the senses. That's what the idea of a dream is to be in a state where the soul can be examined. But the problem with that is that you can examine the soul in that sense, but it is not in a rational realm. This is where the realms are now parted between the mulk and the malakut, right? The mulkiya, which is this world, and then the malakut, which is the spiritual world. Could you share the slide, and I'll be able to explain it better in that sense. So if you look at this, this is just a layout that I have put together just to give you an indication of how this works. So on this furthest extreme right, you've got complete wakefulness, or complete awareness means you're fully awake. This is that peak of your wakeful state. Even though during the wakeful state, you might go through this cycle back and forth. You'll be shifting, right? You'll be moving from, so you might have like a daydream or something, or you might be focused on something entirely and then lose focus for a bit and sort of go into an imaginal thought or something. But that's complete awareness, is you being completely aware of this environment of yours, this conscious state of yours. And so you are, in that case, you are in this realm of alam al-ashkal, or the realm of forms. Ashkal is like, in Urdu you have the word shakal as well. It's from Arabic. It's the shakal of something, is the form of it. So it takes on a form, like this cup over here has a form, right? This is the shape of it. It's cylindrical. It takes on a certain structure. And that's what that poem of Muhammad ibn al-Habib, he says, إِنَّمَا الْكَوْنُ مَعَانِي قَائِمَةٌ بِالصُّوَرِ. Bisuwar, yani suwar is the form, and then its shakal is what it looks like. And then it represents meaning now. So meaning is on the other side of this realm. So this realm of complete awareness is the mulkiya aspect of it, where you have your senses and they're active, and then you've got this other realm in which the heart exists. That's alam al-ma'ani. It's the realm of its meaning, and I cannot show that to you. You have to abstract it. So when you look at the object that I'm holding up in front of you, you see this object and you know what it is. There's a name and there's a word that you can use to associate this object with what it means, what it does, right? What its essence is. That's alam al-ma'ani now, the realm of essence and meaning. But now there is the in between the two. Remember, the form and the meaning, they cannot merge. You can't put them in together. Like we said before, the spiritual and the material, they cannot mix. There has to be an intermediary in between. This is that in the ayah, sanurihim ayatina fil afaqi wa fi anfusihim hatta yatabayyana lahum annahu al-haq. To determine the truth in this case, there has to be what you find in Surah Al-Kahf, Majma'ul Bahrain, a knowledge that comes from two aspects. One that represents the outward form of reality, and then the other that ibaratun, that gives you a discernment, an elaboration, an articulation of it, its meaning. That in between is the domain of the soul now. And then right at the heart of that is where you have the function of the aql. That's alam al-mithal now. The mithal is the realm of symbols and metaphors, analogies, allegories, all these things, where you find now primarily where language in its formal aspect, in its symbolic aspect, that's where it exists. The name, the word, the symbol, the thing that associates the form with its meaning. So if I say cup, right, you know what that means. You know that this is a cup. Anywhere you see one, it could be a different shape, it could be a different size, it could be a different color. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a coffee cup, it could be a teacup, it could be whatever. But you know what it means, right? or if it's a glass, for example, it could be a wine glass, it could be a soda glass, it could be whatever, right? So if I ask in Arabic, or if I ask in English, you know the language, you know the English language, and that's the semantic form of language, that's the outward aspect of it, right? That falls under this realm of form and shape. So if I ask, what is it? And you tell me it's a glass, right? So you know what it is. If I say it in Arabic, mahiya, and you say, tilka hiya zujaja, it's a glass, right? So the word now in this case, glass or zujaja or kubun, it doesn't matter which word you use, it doesn't change what this thing is in reality. And it also does not change what it truly means. And so in order to achieve a clarity and understanding of the truth, right? حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ. You're looking for haqq, you're looking for truth. In order to understand that, you need to accurately link or associate this to its meaning using the correct form and symbol. So it's the realm of symbols that typically gets manipulated. People change the meaning of words, or they will twist and turn they'll give like statements that have got multiple meanings, ambiguous meanings, vague meanings. It can be beneficial in one way and then detrimental in another way. So we do this. Language itself inherently by its nature is purely metaphoric. It's purely allegoric. Why? Because every word does not indicate itself. It refers to something else. Dr. Naqib al-Attas, he gives a very beautiful example of this in, I believe it's in the Prolegomena to the Metaphysics of Islam. He says, if a word was to point to itself, it would no longer be a word. It would be the thing itself. So if you take the word apple, and the word itself meant apple, then and it was pointing to itself, then it would not be a word, it would be the thing itself, it would be the apple. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone. But the idea is that the word indicates something else. Now, when you go into a sleep state, you are departing from the alam al-ashkal, and you are entering into this intermediary realm now. This where you can see now there is a threshold of crossing, a suspended state. And you're moving into alam al-ma'ani. And on the other extreme of that is where you have deep sleep. This intermediary realm is your realm where you will experience what are known as lucid dreams. Now, it's important to understand that lucid dreams do not have the same meaning in Islam as they do in so far as modern Western secular psychology is concerned. Their definition of lucid dreams, that's not the definition we want, because it doesn't take into account the soul. It doesn't take into account sleep being a kind of death, a minor death. It doesn't take that into account, which is primarily like it's embedded in human nature. You cannot separate that. We take the Islam or we take the definition that is given in Islam, and that is helmun wadih. Helmun wadih. And helmun wadih, if you look at the word helm, ahlam are what now you would call dreams. Ahlam. A halim is somebody who is dreaming, and a halim also has the meaning of somebody who is tranquil or who is at peace, or who has forbearance. One of the meanings of like the mother's nipple, the breast, is called halim. And the reason it's called halim is because when the infant is turbulating, when the child is distressed, as soon as the child gets that, what happens to the child? He calms down, he or she calms down, becomes tranquil. And so the same word is now also related to intelligence. Ilham is intelligence. Oh yeah, you can stop sharing that for now. I will probably come back to it later on. Ilham is now intelligence. You see? So what does dreaming have to do with intelligence? Because as far as secular psychology goes, they will not be able to give you that explanation. They don't see any correlation between the two. See, as far as they're concerned, a dream is like a movie or a film that's playing out in your head. It's just a bunch of images that you constructed, right? And that's like entertainment for you while you sleep. So sleep is essentially entertainment as far as they're concerned. I mean, all of life and existence is entertainment as far as they're concerned. But from our perspective, it has to do with intelligence. Because you're experiencing now a ru'ya, meaning you are seeing without the filter of the senses. Now, what is seeing in this case? It's the heart that's seeing. And it is seeing through the aql. This is why you are in a realm of symbols, of metaphors, of allegories. And when I say symbols, I'm not talking about just alphabet symbols or alif, ba, ta, tha, like that. I'm not talking about those. Anything, like whatever shape, whatever form you see in your dream, that's a form, right? It's a symbol. It's representing something, and this is why dreams need to be interpreted. They have to be interpreted. You can never take a dream literally. You can never take a dream literally. In fact, one of the meanings of the ayah in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives Nabi Ibrahim the vision of slaughtering his son, one of the meanings of that is ta'ajjub. Like, قَدْ صَدَّقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا. You took the dream literally. You know, it's a ta'ajjub. Like, you weren't supposed to do that. It was supposed to be metaphoric. It was supposed to represent something. But you took it literally. In any case, whatever, you were safe from doing that. So, but one of the meanings is that. Because anything that you experience in the dream state has to be interpreted. And this is where it becomes very tricky. Not any Tom, Dick and Harry can simply interpret dreams. That's not your task. It requires a level of deep spiritual insight to interpret dreams, because the same components can be experienced by multiple people in a dream, and each of those interpretations will be different for each of those individuals. Like the two men who came to a sheikh and, sorry? No, Yusuf alayhi salam is a different story, because prophetic dreams are different in that sense. Part of prophetic dreams are revelation. No, this is different. So there were two men who came to a sheikh, and one person, and they both had the same dream. They both saw themselves sacrificing a pig and then eating its flesh. And so they came to the sheikh to interpret this thing. And so the sheikh told the one person, you are going to, this is a good dream for you. You're actually going to Hajj. So, this is a good vision for you. The other person was told you are damned because of your greed and misery and miserliness. Same dream, same components, two different individuals having the same dream. And each of those was given a separate interpretation because it was based on their spiritual hal. It is based on the hal of the individual. When you're experiencing a dream, what you are experiencing of that dream is a reflection of your self. This is why when Eden said about one of the conditions of a lucid dream is that you have to be self-aware. You need to be aware of yourself. The state that your psychological state is in, that's what you will be experiencing, but without the filter of the senses. So let's take a look at what Imam Al-Ghazali says. It's very brief, but he actually explains it better than I'm doing a very terrible job of it here. So in the section Fi Ajaib al-Qalb, in as far as the marvels of the heart, because it is the heart that is experiencing, right? The soul is not experiencing anything. The heart is what's experiencing reality. But it is experiencing reality through these faculties, through the intellect, through the soul, through the body, through the senses. So he says, "I'lam anna lil qalb babaini lil ulum." To the heart, there are two gateways. Lil ulum, in the literal sense, we would say like the sciences, but that's not what he means in its original use of the term. Ilm in the original use of the term meant scientia, which in Latin means to know. Scientia in Latin means to know, and this is where the term knowledge is derived from. So ilm is to know. Allama is to wa'allama Adam al-asma'a kullaha is Raghab al-Isfahani says that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like thrusting it as an inspiration into the heart of Adam. This ability to use language, it's not a knowing of the outward. So there are two kinds of knowing, right? There's the knowing of things, and then there's knowing itself. And the knowing of things is simply a gathering of information, but knowing itself is like truly understanding it. So that's what he's talking about insofar as this deep understanding without the semantic aspect of it. So even though you might not know, like you're not a literate person, you don't know how to read and write, but you have an understanding of reality. You have an understanding of how things work. Wahidan lil ahlam. The first of these is through dreams and visions. That's the point where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you an inspired form of knowledge, an intuitive form of knowledge. It is through your dreams that you actually begin to rationalize. Rationalize is a bad word. You begin to merge the two aspects of knowledge, that which is rational and tangible or quantitative with that which is qualitative in nature. I'm avoiding getting more into an epistemological discussion on this, so bear with me. وَالثَّانِي لِعَالَمِ الْيَقَظَةِ. The second is this wakeful state. وَهُوَ الْبَابُ الظَّاهِرِ إِلَى الْخَارِجِ. And this is the external gateway to this outward world. So you wake up is when you now begin to get access to this outward world. When you go to sleep, this outward world, you leave this outward world and then the doors are closed. The last things you do is shut your senses and then you exit this world, right? فَإِن نَامَ غَلَقَ بَابَ الْحَوَاسِ. When you sleep, the door to the senses, the gateway of the senses is shut. So this is the first filter. The filter of the outward world is this, where you acquire a knowing through the senses. This is a filter in itself, and we only have a spectrum of that. There's only a spectrum of how much we can see, a spectrum of how much we can hear, even a spectrum of scent and taste, and then as far as sensitivity of the skin is concerned, the 5 primary senses, you would say. There is a spectrum. Beyond that, we cannot acquire much information unless we employ the use of instrumentation. Like we make tools and technology to expand that spectrum for us. But it's still a filter. A filter to what? A filter to reality. Because this is not just the only reality. This is just one part, a small portion of reality. The Prophet ﷺ said that the unseen compared to the seen is like when you dip your finger in the ocean and you lift it out. That water that is stuck to the finger, that's the seen. And the ocean is the unseen. The amount of water that is clinging to your finger, that's the seen, which means that there's a lot more to reality than just what you can outwardly see. So, and the outwardly seen is just a manifestation of true reality. And this is why in Arabic it is distinguished. You have al-waqi'iyya, which is realistic, and then you have al-haqiqa, which is real or reality. That distinction is not made in the English language. It's the same term, as you can see, real, realistic, right? It's from the same root structure. But in Arabic, the distinction is made between two terms. One is realistic. It only takes on a form. But then there is something else behind it. There is a symbol. Then that symbol has a meaning, and then that meaning takes you to its essence, and then it takes you back, and it takes you back, and it takes you back. فَيُفْتَحُ لَهُ بَابَ الْبَاطِنِ. So then once the senses are closed, the door of the senses are closed, the door of the inward door is now opened for him. وَيُكْشَفُ لَهُ غَيْبٌ مِنْ عَالَمَ الْمَلَكُوتِ. And it is then unveiled to him the unseen of the spiritual realms. Now, you have to understand something, that Imam al-Ghazali's philosophy per se involves the concept of kashf. Now, kashf is actually a Sufi concept as well, but he's not using it in that sense of the Sufi concept of kashf. And you have to be very careful with this term because it's very slippery. Kashf is a real thing. It's not a myth or something. It's a real thing. Kashf means to unveil or to reveal, right? So people do get unveilings. Spiritual unveilings, they do happen to people. Even things like discoveries in sciences and stuff, like that's what an unveiling is. An unveiling of reality, an unveiling of understanding. So kashf is a real thing, but it can also be. It's very difficult to distinguish between a real unveiling and something that's just a volition of the self, something that you think, oh, I got an inspiration or an epiphany or something like that. So he's also very careful with the use of that term. So you have to be careful when you see the word kashf. But what he's saying is that when you go to sleep, the doors of the senses are closed, and the inward door is now open to you. And then through this inward door is when you will begin to get this unveiling of the unseen of the spiritual realms, alam al-malakut. وَمِنَ اللَّوْحِ الْمَحْفُوظ, and from the Lawh al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet. Because what's the preserved tablet? It is that which contains an ordinance of all that is existent, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought into existence. It is essentially a documentation of everything that He is doing, and everything that He will do insofar as creation is concerned in the forward that we are not aware of. Like for us, that would be future, right? We don't know what's going to happen next, but it's already documented in the Lawh al-Mahfuz and preserved there. One of the meanings of ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ is that the Mufassirin say that ذَلِكَ ismu ishara lil ba'id is in reference to the ordinance or part of Allah's speech, kalamullah, that is included in the Lawh al-Mahfuz that has been sent down now in the form of Al-Quran. Anyway, so you begin, what he's saying is that when you have the senses as a filter, you cannot expect to see the unseen and then expect to see what divine ordinance is, because the realm of the senses is a distraction. That's its inherent property, right? Everything in this ard is a zina, is a distraction, it's an allurement. It's meant to keep you preoccupied from true reality, the unseen reality. فَيَكُونُ مِثْلَ الضَّوْء, and this is like clarity. This is true clarity. You cannot expect to have clarity through your... This is why when you want to think, you do this, many people will do this on it's sort of a reflex, they'll just close their eyes. Or they'll want to be in a quiet place, or they won't want any noise or any distractions or anything, because in order to gain clarity, you don't want the noise around you. You don't want to see this outward world. You want to see what's formulating in the imaginal world, the world of the imagination. وَرُبَّمَا احْتَاجُ كَشْفُهُ إِلَى شَيْءٍ تَعْبِيرِ الْأَحْلَامِ. And so it may be necessary in this regard, we are talking about from the psychological perspective, it may be necessary to reveal or unveil something, about your psychological state from the articulation of the dreams. Because let's say you encounter something in this worldly aspect and you're trying to figure out what it is that's causing you distress, but you're not able to put two and two together. Why? Because you're examining what's known as asbab al-adiyah. You're looking at the causal nexus. You see, you're looking at because this and because that. And that's why you're not able to understand why whatever happened to you. And so the dream state will be able to give you the other side of it, the qualitative side of it. This is what you will experience in your lucid dream. and it can also be experienced in other types of because the dreams, by the way, I didn't mention this, there are essentially three types of dreams, three general categories of dreams. You've got dreams that are true dreams, ru'ya salihah, that come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. True dreams are essentially a gift from Allah that give you a truth about reality, whether it is something that happened in your past or is an occurrence within your present, or it will come to pass as Allah has ordained for you. He's going to talk about this in a bit. A glimpse of the preserved tablet is part of a true dream. And the Prophet ﷺ also said that true dreams are 1/46 of prophethood. So there are 46 parts of prophethood. All of those died when the Prophet ﷺ passed. Only one of those has endured and will endure until the end of human history, and that's true dreams. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, this is going into eschatology, that towards the approach of the hour, the true dreams of a believer will continue to come true. The dreams of a believer will continue to come true, like more and more common. I was going to say something else on that. Yes, so that's one type of dream. Then you've got dreams that are demonic they are largely the way you would classify your nightmares. This is now the shayateen messing with you. Because you're in a dream state, you're detached from the body. See, part of the body is that it is also a protecting element. It's weak, it's got its weaknesses, but it is a protectant. Because when your soul is detached from the body, you are actually in your most vulnerable state spiritually. Your most vulnerable state is detachment from the body. Because as far as the jinn are concerned, the shayateen mostly, when they want to possess a human being, when they want to cause distress, they'll possess the body. And largely this will affect your bodily aspect. You'll fall sick, you'll have, different you'll have hallucinations. Some people will end up having seizures or epileptic episodes, things like those. But they can't cause you true harm in that sense. And you also have bad dreams if you're possessed. You also have experience time loss or memory loss. Like you'll have gaps in your memory. You won't be remembering what happened. But when you're in your sleep state, you are actually the most vulnerable because you're not protected by the body. You're open. This is why if you go to sleep in a state of impurity, both physical and spiritual impurity, you increase the risk of being harmed by the jinn, by the shayateen. This is why you've got awrad, and it's recommended that you pray Isha before you go to sleep. It's also recommended that you be in a state of wudu. You do your recitation, you do your dhikr before going off to sleep. You enter into sleep in a mode of seeking protection from Allah, right? So that you can be protected in that state. The third kind is the dreams of the self or self-induced dreams. And these can vary from, this is really the larger spectrum of dreams categorically. These can vary from just images reenacted in the mind where the soul is trying to reconcile information that was gathered in the wakeful state that could not be reconciled in the wakeful state. So, for example, if you had a working day and it was an exhausting working day, like you were working with a lot of information being processed, you are likely to have dreams that reenact some of that information as a mode of sort of filtration and then retention of what is required and getting rid of what is not. And much of it will actually be gotten rid of because it's just information, right? You can always go back to it when you wake up. Or something of the sort. You will be trying to rectify things that are happening to you in your wakeful state, which was a lot to process. You see, you experienced so many events during your wakeful state, it was a lot to process, and so you could not process all of that in your wakeful state. You got exhausted, then you went off to sleep, and now yourself, your soul, is healing itself from that. It is trying to reconcile all that information and to either get rid of it or to preserve what was necessary or beneficial. Then you've got other kinds of dreams in which if you had a conflict with somebody, or you had an event, or you had something that caused you distress during your wakeful state, your soul is going to try and heal itself by reconciling what had transpired. This is what he's talking about. Largely, you might see this in sort of a lucid state. Let's say you have somebody or you know somebody that you had a conflict with, you were not able to resolve that conflict, and there was this anger or wrath that had enveloped you at that moment, which you just really held on to, and you didn't let it escape, and it reached a tipping point for you, but you still kept it. You might actually experience a dream in which you're hitting that person or beating that person or strangling that person or releasing this wrath that you had in you. It's just flowing out of you. That's the self trying to heal itself of this overly inflated ghadab faculty of yours, in which you try to control yourself in the moment and you didn't have anywhere to vent it out. So you're experiencing a dream in which you're doing that. Or if it was a desire of sorts, you saw ice cream and you held on to yourself. And no matter how much the drive of the self was to have that, you just held on to yourself. And you just didn't take that. So you might actually see yourself in a dream, eating ice cream after ice cream, sort of, it's rectifying itself. This is part of the soul healing itself. This is your psychological healing. And by the way, any good psychiatrist or psychologist, if they really know what they're doing, they'll ask you about your dreams. They'll ask you, have you been dreaming? What sort of dreams are you having? And there's some things that they will be able to put into perspective to say, oh, this is probably the reason why, if it's a recurring dream, for example, the reason why I'm having this dream is related to this side. And then you have now your lucid dreaming, in which you will experience these other two types of dreams of the self, as well as something else now, which is now ibrah. It is a form of learning or a discernment, in which there is some aspect of reality that you're trying to understand, but you cannot understand it from reality itself. It requires you to be in this other state of being, where you are able to see it from a different perspective. Not perspective, but from the other side of reality, from the side of meaning. And people have actually learned in that sense. Like, people have learned languages in their dreams. They have learned tactics. They've learned strategies. They've learned incredible things they've seen in their dreams, particularly in their lucid state of dreaming. Because in the lucid state of dream, you are able to, your aql is able to construct forms that abide by rationality. You see? Because when you sleep, you're cut off from the body. You're cut off from the brain. You're cut off from the senses. In other words, you're cut off from the rational world. This is why dreams are irrational. They don't make sense to you. You can't interpret a dream. You can't take it literally. You have to interpret it. But in a lucid state, you are in that in-between realm. Can you share the diagram again? You are in this in-between realm whereby you have access to, expand that please. You have access now. You can see where these two large circles are merging together. You have this threshold of crossing. You are actually in this in-between of, or what we call, I've termed here as the suspended state. You are suspended between deep sleep and complete awareness. You're lucid. You see, you're shifting between the two. So you've got access to symbolic form as well, which is your rational aspect now. The quantitative side of reality. And then you've got access to the symbolic meaning, not meaning itself, but the symbolic meaning, and you're able to sort of merge the two together. This state is where, if you are somebody who is, whichever field maybe you are in of learning, this is the state that will primarily help you learn those things that are difficult to learn in the wakeful state. Like for me, for example, language is one of those. I will actually learn meaning of words in this dream state, and I have, and I'll attest to that. And anyone who's done that, they'll attest to that. I know some of my teachers, they've attested that they've actually learned words that they didn't know before in this intermediary state. And then they'll wake up and they'll remember that. And then they'll go and look up in the dictionary and find, oh, right there, that's the word, and that's exactly what it means. Isn't that amazing? Right? So you can stop sharing that. So this is why it may be necessary, because the dreams may be required to further extrapolate the psychological state. Now, let me continue and then I'll come to that. So he says, وَأَمَّا مَا كَانَ مِنَ الظَّاهِرِ. As for this outward reality, so that was so far as now this inward aspect of your sleep and dream. As for this outward reality, فَيَظُنَّ النَّاسُ أَنَّ بِهِ الْيَقَظَةِ. People assume that this is real wakefulness, this outward reality. See, you woke up, you had your cup of coffee, and you're now in reality. See, people assume that this is true wakefulness. وَأَنَّ الْيَقَظَةَ أُولَى بِالْمَعْرِفَةِ. And they think that this wakefulness takes precedence over true understanding, right? They think that because this world, this outward world will give you the ciencia. Science stops at the how-ness of things, and that's this outward world. Science cannot take you further than that. Further than that, which you've got in logic, you've got those three primary questions: the what, the how and whether, and then you have the why. Science will take you up until the how and whether this, whether that, and how things are. So if you ask a doctor, why does Tylenol work? And they start giving you a whole formula about how when you take the pill, it goes in and then the enzymes do this and then this does that, and then what they're giving you is the how-ness of it. They're not telling you why it works. The why is what the logicians call min al-ma'loom ila al-majhul. It is from the ma'loom, which is the known, the ilmi aspect of it, where you can derive the ulum from, into the majhul, which is the unknown aspect of it, which is now the malakuti aspect of things. You're going into al-ma'ani. You're going into al-ma'ani. You're going into now the meanings. It's unknown. And this process is called qiyas. It's called reasoning. Next week, inshallah, we'll talk about the kinds of intelligence, psychological intelligence. So I'll explain this better, inshallah, next week. So people think that this worldly aspect, whatever they learn from this reality, that's it. This is us who are conscious now about this. When they go to sleep, oh, it's just, it's just rest. It's just whatever. It's just a film playing in your head. It's just a nightmare. I had a good dream, nice, good for you. They ignore that aspect of their reality, when in true, it's not just as. This is what modern science is reduced to. It's called a reduced to, right? It's a reductionist methodology. Everything is just this or it's just that. What's the human being? It's just a biological organism. Or it's just catabolic and anabolic reactions. You see, it's just this and just that. That's not true reality. So people think, most of mankind thinks that's now. This is Imam al-Ghazali talking in the 11th, 12th, 13th century, in that age of the peak of Islamic science in the world. And he's saying that at his age, based on his observation, this is what people think. I wonder what he would say when he comes and sees reality the way it is right now. Because people are actually moving from a tangible reality into now a virtual reality. They're even further away from that. And they're believing that to be reality. The true ilm that he refers to, and he spoke about it a couple of more times, is the ilm that's converted the knowledge aspect of it into ma'rifah. That's what he's saying. The ultimate destination of ilm should be understanding. So you can be an individual who doesn't know the formulas, who doesn't know the theories, who doesn't know what the laws are, what the matan, what the sharh is. You don't know all these things, but you have an understanding of them. This is knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not scientific knowledge. And the scientific knowledge is just a facilitation. It's just one step. Dr. Naqib al-Atas, again in the same book, he talks about how knowledge is a twofold journey. There is one fold which is the soul arriving to meaning. That's the ciencia now. You've reached a certain point. You've learned, you've determined the what of things and the howness of things. And then you've reached a point now where now you are expecting the next step. But that next step is now meaning has to arrive to your soul. That's the second part of the journey of acquiring knowledge. And that's where you get ma'rifah. So you've got this outward aspect where the senses convert information to the use of the intellect. That's ilm now, that's science. That's your sciences. Whenever you're learning, whatever you're studying, that's information being converted into quote unquote knowledge. Then there's the second portion of that where it is being converted from the symbolic form into now meaning, delivery between the intellect and the heart now. That is ma'rifah. That is true knowledge. This is a knowledge of. You just know of things. Even the atheist, he knows about God. He does. That's why he's arguing it. He knows of God. And he's arguing for or against his existence. This is where a majority of people are. They know of things, but they think they have knowledge. But they only have a knowledge of things. They know of Islam. They know about Islam. They know about the fiqh. They know, but they don't have true fiqh, right? Fiqh means to understand. A faqih is somebody who understands or has understanding. That's the original term, the meaning of the word. A faqih, one of the meanings, you can look it up in Lisan al-Arab, was the shepherd who could determine which of the mares or which of the sheep he had was pregnant. Right? You've got the ram and you've got the mare. Which of the mares, the female sheep, was pregnant without any sensory information required, any testing required. He could just determine that because he understands the sheep. That's a faqih. It's an understanding of the religion. Yufaqihu fi din. The Prophet ﷺ said, Man yuridillahu bi khair yufaqihu fi din. The one for whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants khair gives him an understanding of the deen. Doesn't mean he teaches him hadith and fiqh and all these things. These are the ciencia, these are the ulum. They are meant to facilitate ma'rifah. So you can graduate with a whole PhD, 10 PhDs in Islamic sciences. You can be doctor, sheikh, maulana, mufti, blah, 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 and then your name. And then after that, you can be LLB, MBBS, whatever other titles come after that. Does not mean that you have an understanding. Because ma'rifah entails having nur in the heart. It is the heart that is enlightened with an understanding. It is the heart that has been enlightened. This is why he's classifying this as part of the ajaib al-qalb. He would have put this in his other texts because it's derived from his Ihya Ulumuddin Ajaib al-Qalb, the marvels of the heart. He would have put it in another text. He would have put it in the beginning, Kitab al-Ilm. But that's just the surface of it. You're just scratching the surface. That's why Kitab al-Ilm is the first book in Ihya. It's just the surface of things. Anyway, we can talk about this all day, and it goes more into sound epistemology in Islam, true episteme in Islam. So they think that this is true consciousness because they're awake now. وَأَنَّ الْيَقَظَةَ أُولَى بِالْمَعْرِفَةِ. They think that this is true consciousness. مع أنه لا يبصر في اليقظة شيء من عالم الغيب. Even though, and this is him calling out their stupidity, because it is stupidity. If you think about it, how can you see this as true reality when even though you look at it, you cannot see the unseen from this true reality? So how can you assume that this is the true reality? How can you have your entire focus of being on this outward world and then expect to have sound psychological soundness, to be at peace, to find tranquility, to find solutions, to find clarity, and you're stuck with your perfumes and your designer bags and your fancy clothes and your cars, and these are your pursuits in life. Materiality, you think that this is true reality and this is giving you happiness and delight. And then you want sound, you want tranquility, you want sakina, you want sukoon. That's why you put up all these different ayat in your house, on the door, in the car, it's hanging off the rear view mirror. That's why you do all those, because that is sukoon to you. And yet you still do not realize what is eating you up inside. وَمَا يُبْصِرُ بَيْنَ النَّوْمِ وَالْيَقْظَةِ أُولَى بِالْمَعْرِفَةِ مِمَّا يُبْصِرُ مِنْ طَرِيقَ الْحَوَاسِ. Rather, what you will see in between the wakeful and the sleep state. That's the lucid state, that in between that we spoke about. What you see in that in between, that is your true reality, because that's the merging of the two. Majma' al-Bahrain. That is your outward scientia merging with the meaning, where form is associating with meaning, merging the two together, without you having to interpret one for the other. You're not stuck with symbols now. You've taken the symbols out of the picture. You've merged the two together in that state. This is more deserving. Ula bil ma'rifa. It is more deserving of understanding of the word ma'rifa. Mimma yubsiru min tariq al hawas. Rather than what is then seen through the senses. What you see in this intermediary sense is more deserving than what you will see in this outward sense of it. And here's the interesting thing about this. Muslims, first of all, have completely neglected this thing, because for some reason they ended up classifying this as a Sufi thing. Because the Sufiya do this. They really have a lot of emphasis on dreams and visions and kashf and these type of things. Which, like I said, if you overdo it, and this is what they do, is they overdo it, you're going to have a problem, right? You're going to fall into fantasy. But it's still part of reality. You can't avoid it. Now, whatever psychologists that I have met who study psychology and then call it Islamic psychology, all they've done is converted, right? They've translated what the Westerners have done and translated it. They don't like to talk about these things. And they'll take out an entire section, centuries of scholarly research in our tradition, and just do away with it. Like it didn't exist. Like you'll see something that talks about, because they cannot override the numerous sahih hadith about dreams. They cannot do anything about all the recounting of dreams and visions in the Quran that prophets themselves have experienced. They can't do that. They can't remove that. But what they will do is they'll take out this entire section out, gone, no more dreams. And then you come down in history, round about the 17th century is when you see now Western psychology starts coming up with all these notions about dreams and the importance of studying dreams. And then you'll see like these things about lucid dreams and all these terminologies. Now, modern day muftis are going to look at these terms and then they will declare fatwa against all that. Because they are problematic, because they are terms that are made by them and their definitions are given by them. But none of these experts, okay, will look at the tradition that has been left behind. I mean, you've got people like Ibn Sirin, for example, or Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, Ibn Sina in this case, Imam al-Ghazali, they made incredible advancements insofar as dreams and visions are concerned when it comes to the perspective from Islam is, because this is a reality of your being. It's not a passive thing. It's part and parcel of your existence. Like, you're not just seeing an enactment of a film in your mind. You're experiencing a reality that is unfiltered. Now, there's still a filter there, which we'll look at next, actually. There's still a filter there, but the filter of the realistic world has been removed. So you're actually experiencing your own reality, yourself, in its true form. And it cannot be ignored insofar as psychology is concerned. So in the next section then he says, فَصْلُ الْقَلْبِ مِثْلُ الْمِرْآةِ, the example or the allegory of the heart as a mirror. He says, وَتَحْتَاجُ أَن تَعْرِفَ فِي الضِّمْنِ ذَلِكَ أَنَّ الْقَلْبَ مِثْلُ الْمِرْآةِ. So it is vital that you understand now concerning this matter of now leaving the sensory world and entering now into the malakuti world, that the heart is like a mirror. وَاللَّوْحَ الْمَحْفُوظ مِثْلُ الْمِرْآةِ أَيْضًا. And the Lawh al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet, is also like a mirror. So you've got two mirrors now. لأن فيه سورة كل موجود. Because in the Lawh al-Mahfuz is reflected all that is existent. All that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, what He has created, how He has created, and why He has created what's known as the logos, the logos, the ontos, and the telos. The form of the thing, which is now what you would represent via logic. It's what is studied in all the sciences. That's why every science has got a logy at the end, right? Biology, you've got whatever, all those logy at the end. And then you've got the onto, which is now the ontology of a thing, the nature of a thing. So you've got the form that a thing is, and then what is its nature. And then you've got the teleology of a thing, which is what is its purpose. And modern sciences, they ignore the other two. They don't believe in the ontology of a thing or teleology of a thing. They say, oh, this is part of philosophy, so it's not part of science. Whereas our predecessors, they actually studied all three under sciences. They examined the form, they examined its nature, they studied its nature, and then they also understood what purpose it served in reality. So in the Lawh al-Mahfuz is reflected everything that is existent. وَإِذَا قَابِلَتِ الْمِرْآةِ بِمِرْآةٍ أُخْرَى حَلَّتْ صُوَرَ مَا فِي إِحْدَاهُمَا فِي الْأُخْرَى. So if you place one mirror in front of another mirror, what's in one mirror will be reflected in the other mirror. And this is a phenomenon. You can try this. We studied this in optics when I was doing physics. You put two mirrors in parallel against each other, and then what's reflected in one will be reflected in the other continuously, like infinitely. Okay, you'll actually experience this if you go into an elevator that has mirrors on either side. You go into the elevator, you'll see yourself reflected that way and yourself reflected that way. Right? Because one mirror reflects whatever is in the other mirror. وكذلك تظهر صور ما في اللوح المحفوظ إلى القلب إذا كان فارغا من شهوات الدنيا. So, likewise, what is in the preserved tablet, what's in the Lawh al-Mahfuz will appear on the heart because one is reflecting the other. So if the heart is pure, is what he's saying, when it is freed, إِذَا كَانَ فَارِغًا مِنْ شَهَوَاتِ الدُّنْيَا, when it is freed from the shahawat, the desires of the dunya, it is cleansed, it will reflect what's in the Lawh al-Mahfuz. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained now will be, in other words, you will be in harmony with God's ordinance. Synchronicity with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained, that's the soundest state you can be in. The soundest, most tranquil state that you can be in, your heart can be in, is to be in direct synchronicity with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained, which is in the Lawh al-Mahfuz. فَإِنْ كَانَ مَشْغُولًا بِهَا كَانَ عَالَمَ الْمَلَكُوتِ مَحْجُوبًا عَنْهُ. But on the other hand now, if the heart is preoccupied by this worldly domain now, right? Your perfumes and your phones and your cars and your designer this and your holiday there and your vacation there, staying at this hotel and that hotel and this and that, big house, fancy everything. Your heart is delighting in these things. You see, it's confused because it's not in charge. The hierarchy of governance internally has not been set properly. The shahawat now, which are part of your lower self, the desires, those are the ones that are delighting in this worldly aspects. And so your heart, unfortunately, is now also preoccupied in that because your heart is deluded. You're in a state of ghafla, deluded into believing that this reality is a true reality. كان عالم الملكوت محجوبا عنه. The alam al-malakut, the spiritual realms, will be concealed, will be hidden from it, will be veiled from it. وإن كان في حال النوم فارغا من علائق الحواس طالع جواهر عالم الملكوت. But if you enter the sleep state, and then you enter the sleep state freed from this worldly affairs, you enter into a pure state, right? You actually go through, first of all, the outward rites, the physical. So let's say you do your wudu, you prayed your Isha, you do your adhkar, and then you sort of drift off to sleep while doing that. That's the outward. Then the other aspect is now the more inward aspect. You actually get rid of one of the techniques that they give you insofar as sleep therapy is to empty your thoughts, empty your mind. Don't think about the worldly things. Don't think about the things that troubled you during the day or brought you any form of distress or triggered anything, any aspect of yourself. Don't think about all those things. Just go in with a blank mind and think about goodly things, or in this case, godly things. Think about while you're doing your adhkar, reminisce the things that you would want to see in your dreams. Or in my case, like what I would do is I would just try to when I'm doing my recitation before going to sleep, while I'm sleeping, I will just ponder on the meanings of the ayat that I'm reciting, and how I drift off to sleep, so that you cut off the sensory chains. Ala'iq al-hawas, you cut off from the sensory chains. And then you will be able to see jawahir, the essence of the spiritual realms. فَظَهَرَ فِيهِ بَعْدُ الصُّوَرُ الَّتِي فِي اللَّوْحِ الْمَحْفُوظِ. He will then see some of the reflections that are in the preserved tablet. You cannot see the preserved, it's not a physical object. It's not a physical thing. You can't see it while you're awake. You have to see it while you're in that dream state. Now, in the dream state, by the way, the soul enters into a realm that is intermediary between the material plane and the first heaven. Okay? This is the barzakh now. It's the breach. Barzakh, one of its meaning is the breach or the gap. It's the intermediary realm. If you are entering the sleep state while you are chained to this world and the affiliations of this world, say you go to sleep and all you're thinking about how somebody did something to you, or someone said this and someone said that, or whatever it is that is worldly related, then you will be in this barzakh now, you will be closer to the earthly domain as opposed to the heavenly domain. You see, the heavier you are, the heavier your burdens are, or you burden yourself with while you're entering into the sleep state, the heavier you burden yourself with, the closer you will be to the earthly domain. And the more stress that you compound yourself with, you will actually end up having dreamless sleeps. Did I say that correctly? Yes, dreamless sleep. You will end up having a dreamless sleep. It will be blank. Because you are so close to the earthly domain that you are unable to form the imago in your mind. Because you need to enter the space of the soul. The mind needs to be detached from the sensory realm to form the imago. You cannot form an image while your eyes are open because you're capturing information from the worldly side. Now, the soul can be entrenched in the worldly aspect. Even though the senses are closed physically, it is still linked, it's still chained to this material realm. So you're too close to the worldly aspect to really experience a true dream. Now, in the gap in between the heavenly, the first heaven, and this earthly domain, you are open and vulnerable. If you enter into this without protection, then you will be attacked by the shayateen, by the jinn, if they choose to attack you. This is where you will get your nightmares now. They will attack you because you're open, you're unprotected. You don't have that spiritual protection. While you're in your bodily state, they may or may not be able to possess you. It's tricky. It's not a given thing like whenever they come in through you. Every day they pass through you. No. It's a very tricky thing. And that protection is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's protection over the body as well. Without His authority, no demon can possess a human being. But if you're in this gap now where you do not have this protection, the chances of you being attacked by a demon will be very high. If you come close now, you've become lofty in this case. Now, lofty here does not mean proud or arrogant. It means like you've been lightened. You see, you're not burdened by the materiality. When you're entering the sleep state, you're free of all that. You're able to come closer to the first heaven. I'm doing this, by the way, in terms of just because it's not a matter of up and down, like physically like this. Okay, I'm just doing this as illustration. If you're freed of that, you will be able to come close to the first heaven. This is where you will be able to now have access. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows it for you, you will have access to the malakut, the spiritual realms. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ordinance descends from the arsh. And then it comes down the 7th, the 6th, the 5th. This is why there's a hadith you will find in Sahih Bukhari, very interesting hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, the occupants of heaven, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala issues an ordinance, the occupants of heaven hear this chain like sound being dragged over stone, this resonance that instills fear in their hearts. All the occupants of heaven. And they remain in that state until Jibril comes down, carrying the ordinance. He's going through the heavens. And then they ask him, Jibril, Ma qala rabbuka, what has your Lord said? And then Jibril says, Al-Haq, he has spoken the truth. That's why it's a weighty word. Sanulqi, we will cast upon you qawlan thaqila, a weighty word, a heavy word. That's the truth. So if you come close to in your sleep state, well, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it, He will give you a glimpse of that ordinance, because it descends the heavens and then it stops on the first heaven. And then when it is ordained to enter the material realm to manifest, only then will it be allowed to enter. This is where now time sort of messes with your mind, because we're talking about time sequentially in the material realm, but then it's not sequentially in the heavens. So the ordinance is already there. As far as we are concerned, it just hasn't come down yet. It hasn't entered our realm. So you might catch a glimpse of this. This is why people are able to see something that will happen later on in their dreams. And then that thing happens, and then they'll like have this strange realization, wow, I saw that in my dream. And then stupid people will start thinking they have special powers. Oh, I am psychic. But then smart people will realize that's an inspiration from Allah. and to say Alhamdulillah, that Allah chose you to receive that. He's going to explain later on, I think next, yes, we'll talk about this next week inshallah. So he says, وَإِذَا أَغْلَقَ بَابَ الْحَوَاسِ كَانَ بَعْدُهُ الْخَيَالِ. When the doors of the senses are shut now, opened to him now is the door of khayal, the imaginal faculty now, the imaginal filter. So you've got the sensory filter, and then you've got the filter of the imagination. Now this is also, it's important to understand, this is why interpreting dreams is not something every Tom, Dick and Harry can do, because you need to have the spiritual acumen to go beyond the imago. A very unique set of individuals have that ability to look beyond the form, and then which is the sensory domain, and then to look beyond the imago, which is the symbolic domain, and then to see the meaning of it. So you can't just willy-nilly interpret a dream, and you shouldn't do that. Especially not for somebody else. You can attempt it by yourself, for yourself, as something you saw. But if you're not sure of it, don't take that as hard truth. This is why, as a principle in our tradition, you cannot take ahkam from dreams. No one can say, oh, I saw in my dream that you have to pray 40 rakat at 3 in the morning on such and such a night, and then turn that into a hukum. You cannot do that. You cannot take rulings from dreams. Even if you have a circumstance that happened, and then in your dream you saw yourself resolve that circumstance in a certain way, you cannot take that as a ruling. You can't, even though you saw it, because you don't know, number one, is it from the shayateen? Is it a construct of your own mental state? And is your mental state pure enough to construct a pure or a true ruling? Because it could be influenced by negative attributes of your soul. And then your soul is just looking for a quick way out, a solution, a quick fix. You can't take that as ruling. You still have to come back to the actual tangible rulings that have been determined through rationality, because fiqh is rational. You see, fiqh is sharia has to be applied in the dhahiri sense, not in a metaphoric sense. You don't do allegory as far as sharia is concerned. Anyway. So you have the filter of the imagination. It's still a filter. It's still not your true reality, right? So it's still a filter. لذلك يكون الذي يبصره تحت ستر القشر وليس كالحق الصريح مكشوفا فإذا مات أي القلب بموت صاحبه لم يبقى خيال ولا حواس. This is very interesting. It says, what you see now is what lies under the veil of the externalities. So you've got the veil of you've got the externalities, then you have a veil, which is the senses. And then you've got beyond that veil now, there's something that is underlying what the external elements are. So you're now seeing from the imaginal side of it. Think of it like you've got two screens, like this is where I am, then there's a screen here, and then another screen here. And I'm seeing through both of these screens to look at what's on the other side. If I take off that first screen now, it's like I've removed a filter, right? Now I can see without that filter, but there's still this filter here. So I'm still looking at reality through the imaginal filter. وَلَيْسَ كَالْحَقَّ الصَّرِيحِ مَكْشُوفًا. And this is not the clear truth, because it's still got a filter, right? This is why your aqli projections cannot be taken as true. All these people who now go into the Quran, look at the ayah, oh, I think it means this, and oh, I think it means that. You're looking at the speech of Allah that has come from the purest source, the purest origin, unfiltered. And you're coming in and projecting that, your own filters, to that. I think it means this. I think this is what what Allah is trying to. Ittaqillah, brother. Have fear of Allah. I mean, you have to put yourself. You cannot take that lightly. This is the word of your Lord, your Creator. And you just come in and say, I think it is this and I think it is that. On what grounds? On what basis? Who made you his prophet and messenger to carry his word? To say what you think it means? You're still looking at reality through a filter, and you cannot escape that filter. It is a part of you. This is what he's saying. It's not the clear truth. It's not the crystal clear truth yet that is unveiled. The crystal clear truth now that you're looking for will only be unveiled when you die. Because at the time of death, and he says, ay al-qalb bimauti sahibihi, by the death of its companion. So the heart has its companion, which is the body, right? This is just his way of articulation. In the earlier sections, he said al-qalb wal-qalib, right? The heart and its vessel and its body. This is its body. This is its companion. The heart's companion in this world. So when the heart's companion dies, the heart is now, or the being in this case, is now moving permanently from this realm into the other realm. لم يبقى خيال ولا حواس. He is no longer blocked in this case by the senses or the imagination. That's when you are seeing true reality. As وفي ذلك الوقت وفي ذلك الوقت يبصر بغير وهم وغير خيال ويقال له فكشفنا عنك غطاءك فبصرك اليوم حديد. And at that time now, he will now see without wahm, without imagination, without this illusion, because that's what wahm is. The English word whim comes from that. Wahm is an estimation. Wahm is also a part of your, in a sense, the department of estimation, your calculative ability to be able to put things into perspective and then anticipate their outcomes. This is why we say this is a very dangerous thing that you can do if you start falling into predictive modes. You think you know everything that's going to transpire. You're actually putting yourself in delusion. This is why it's called wahm. You see, it can easily put you in a state of delusion because you cannot know everything. One of the components of knowing is time, which you cannot know how it will unfold. This moment here has infinite possibilities of an outcome. Infinite possibilities of an outcome. I cannot determine what all those possibilities will be and whether they will all be immediate or they will be distant. I know I can anticipate some of those possibilities will be immediate, some will be distant. Some will be favorable, some will be detrimental. But I don't know which is which. Going now into my future unfolding. I do not know if one of those possibilities that unravels for my being, whether it's going to unravel the way it unravels, or there will be an intersection with the possibility of another individual encountering something else, where, we would say in speech something like, oh, our destinies are intertwined. We've met. We've collided somehow. Something is not, and another possibility starts unfolding from there. I cannot determine that. No one, no, it doesn't matter how genius you are. You cannot determine that. So there's no way that you can. This is why if you start thinking that you know everything about everything, fall into this sense of a superiority complex. I know everything that there is to know because I read this book and I read that article and I watched 5 minutes of Mufti so-and-so and 20 minutes of this other sheikh on YouTube. Now you know everything about everything. You're in a state of delusion. You're living in delusion. This is why he's saying, at that time now, once now all these filters have been removed from you, and now you are seeing without delusion, without imagination. You are seeing reality as it is. There is no processing of information at that time. You're not working things out. You're not going to try and see, does this fall under Boyle's law, or is it abide by Newton's law, or is it gravity effect? There's none of that. There's no scienza taking place at that time. It is thus said to him, thus now we have removed the veils from you. And today now, on this day, your gaze, your eyes, your sight is piercing. فَكَشَفْنَا عَنْكَ غِطَاءَكَ فَبَصَرُكَ الْيَوْمَ حَدِيدٌ. Your gaze is piercing sharp. You are seeing reality now for the first time. You are seeing without any filter. Your heart, your being is now in true reality. Now, let's stop there, inshallah. And next week, we are going to talk about intelligence, insight, intuition, what now it means to see with the heart. That's what it's a segue now into this other side. What does it mean now to see with the heart? Even though you're in this world, you've got these filters, you've got the senses, you've got all these things, does not mean that you are cut off from that reality. It just means that they are there in place as an obstacle or a problem for you to solve through. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's testing you, He's testing your endurance, He's testing your intelligence, He's testing to see, are you going to be the best of them, or are you just going to be like everyone else? And in this regard, everyone else, أُولَٰئِكَ كَالْأَنْعَامِ, they are just like livestock. So are you just going to be among those categories, those characters? Or are you going to rise and be what He wants you to be as a Khalifa? So, inshallah, next week we will talk about the intellect, intelligence, this is going to, actually next week will be very interesting. I might take a little longer than our regular 1 hour session. We'll talk about yaqeen. We will talk about a unique concept called dakhliya, tahliya, and tajliya. The emptying, and then the adorning, and then the unveiling. The process of it. So we'll talk about that next week, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan. Let's stop here, take a quick break, and then we'll meet again in 5 minutes. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Jazakallah. Now, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Let's go ahead with questions and discussion. And I was just told that someone had that some people missed last week's class session. So if you have questions from the previous session as well, that's fine. You can ask if it'll help catch you up, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. In one of the previous class, it was mentioned that when we repent, our dream changes. I know I'm not clear enough, but this is what I remember.
Okay, yes, thank you for actually asking that question. It was part of something that I kept saying I will discuss in this class. So, when you're having a psychological distress, like we spoke about in the last couple of sessions also, that what you inhibit in your psychology, that's going to manifest ultimately and become something permanent. So I emphasize mostly on the superiority complex side, right? You will actually see this reflection in your dream. So that's what Ghazali was talking about. He said that if you're going to be overcome by your shahwa, your concupiscence, your greed, your lust, and all these things, then you will end up seeing yourself in your dreams submitting to a pig. And then if you're overcome with your ghadab, your irascible, your argumentative, your defense, your anger and wrath, then you will see yourself in the dream prostrating to a dog. Now, he's just giving you a straight one-to-one thing, but you will see many different aspects of your dreams enacted based on what it is that you are inhibiting during your wakeful state. So if you're inhibiting like a superiority complex, you're disdainful towards others, you're looking down on them, or you're boastful, you're arrogant, you're showing off, you're fueling your desire through other means, material acquisitions, adorning yourself extravagantly in that sense to sort of overcompensate, you will actually see yourself in that dream state as well. You'll see yourself as this superior being, and it will actually manifest in a nightmare. It's going to bug you. When you now start rectification of the self, primarily in the wakeful state, through changing these habits, these traits, these inhibitions, overcoming them, it's difficult in the first stages, but then it starts getting easier. The first thing, the most difficult thing is to break the self. When you get past that first step of breaking the self, then you start going through this process of healing now. Slowly, your dreams will start changing as a reflection of your psyche, because you're seeing in your sleep state what you would otherwise not see of your soul in your wakeful state. So your dreams will start changing. And that's an indicative to see, because you can avoid a certain sin, a habitual sin, for instance. You can avoid that for a certain duration. You see, like 21 days is typically the ideal range for changing a habit. So if you're a smoker, for example, if you don't smoke for 21 days, that usually is the first step to breaking the habit. And then you will have to also stretch the duration until it becomes permanently habitualized. Your non-smoking now is habitualized. So the 21 days is breaking the habit, is changing. You're shifting from one habit into a different habit. You're unlearning so that you can now relearn. If you pick up the habit again within a short duration of time, like a month or so, or even within 6 months, because typically psychological habits are 6 months to a year. 6 months to break the habit, and then 6 months to relearn, let's say, another habit that will cover that up. If you break that, you will see it in your dream. So maybe you haven't done the habit for 2 months, but then you'll see it in your dream, and that's indicative that the habit is still there, or the sin is still there, the blemish is still there, or the thought of it is still there. Some aspect of it is still there in your wakeful state, right? This is why it is important not to, whatever you see in your dream. I mean, one of the things that good psychiatrists, psychologists will do is they'll tell their patient to keep a dream journal. So every morning you wake up, you had a dream, you write down what the dream was about. And then over a duration of time, you start looking back at those dreams and you start seeing a certain pattern emerge from those dreams. You see, they might be slightly different in construct, this way or that way. Some aspects might change, the environment might change, but then you start seeing a certain pattern. That pattern can be used as part of the diagnosis to see. I mean, this is a bit more in the advanced level. We're not doing pathology in this course to trace back a disease, to understand what the diseases are. But to give you an indicative, this is one of the techniques that you can use to sort of determine the pattern and see exactly, okay, maybe this is why this particular disorder or stress or compulsion, because many of the complexes that you go through will often inhibit into compulsions and disorders and obsessions. So somebody with a complex will inhibit a compulsion, that they just have to do certain things, they can't avoid it. Or obsessions, they just have to think or be like a certain thing has to happen, and otherwise they will not be able to move forward. Like somebody just has to put on perfume, otherwise they will not be able to leave the house. They just won't be able to. Or in the case of women, for example, they just have to put on makeup. Without that, they cannot go out of their house, or they cannot talk to anyone. And they'll say things like, this is what gives me my self-esteem and my this and my that. Those are all justifications of the self. But to be able to, determine, even if you let go of the habit, you haven't done it for a week, for you to get an indicative of whether or not it's still there, you will see it in your dream. Either the dream will have changed as a reflection of a true change, or it will still be the same dream, maybe in a different construct. Anyway, that's a long answer.
When we are temporarily disconnected from our material and non-material worlds in our sleep, our ruh is still there, and I imagine it is still connected to the spiritual world. the world of the ruh. Can we say it is our ruh that is the command of Allah that results in a true dream? What happens in a demonic bad dream?
The ruh, that's not really our focus of this. That's a lot more complex to speak about the ruh. But the ruh in this case is the animal spirit, ruh al-hayawani. It is the spirit that is enlivening the body, that allows the body to live. So the ruh is always there. The ruh doesn't live, because if the ruh is removed, then the body will die. It won't survive, and the soul has to move on. The soul, now you see, you have to think about this. Don't think about locations, like your soul is coming out and going somewhere else. Don't think in that sense. Don't think in terms of spatial dimensions. You have to break linearity of thought. You have to break linearity of thought. So don't think about it in this sense. The soul is always trying to synchronize with the body. From birth up until maturity, around about the age of 40. Because the body is constantly undergoing transformation. So the soul is always changing. It is slowly getting access to newer and newer aspects of the body as the body is undergoing transformation. When you sleep, it sort of detaches from the bodily aspect, but there's still a link that keeps it with the body. So it's not like it goes somewhere, like physically goes somewhere. It's just not in the physical world, material world. It's just detached and entered into the spiritual realms. So sakarat is an interesting concept. You'll find this in my book, Understanding Ghazali's Alchemy of Happiness. Sakarat is a very interesting concept, intoxication. Because what intoxication does to you is it causes a desynchronicity between the soul and the body. A temporal desynchronicity between the soul and the body. This is what it creates, a veil between the two. But the ruh is still there. It's still facilitating the life of the body. When the ruh is taken away, min amri rabbi, it will return to him. Then the body will die. And then re-establishing a connection between the soul and the body is not possible anymore. So intoxication, what it does is similar to, that's what you call sakaratul maut. Sakara is intoxication. Sakaratul maut is the most extreme form of intoxication. So sakaratul maut is a natural intoxication, sort of, so to speak, a sense of detachment of the soul from the body. And then intoxication through substance, that's an induced intoxication. This is why if you overdose, then the natural conclusion is death. Like you can't come back from that. It's very difficult to come back from an overdose. Anyway, I'm talking about a different subject altogether. But yeah, the ruh is always there with the body. It always enlivens the body. Mm-hmm. Alaikum salam. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Alaikum salam.
Everyone is doing good. Sheikh, I wanted to talk about the dreams. As you said, dreams are like something that it's a reflection of ourselves, right? So, first of all, I would like to ask, does the timing of the dreams matter? Like, for example, if we see a dream in the middle of the night, or for example, if we see sometime after Fajr prayer, does this thing affect our dreams or our internal health? Is there anything to do with it? And what about the dream inside a dream? Is this something possible, or it's just a fiction?
So for your first question, actually, that's a very good question. You have something called a circadian rhythm or a circadian cycle. It's a circa, right? It goes around. So you have a cycle, every 24-hour cycle, which is a daily cycle. You have a cycle of sleep and wakefulness. Now, within that cycle, you've got multiple cycles. Time unfolds in cycles, by the way. So if We haven't done that course, but you'll find this in my book, Time and Cosmology. Time unfolds in cycles. So in the sleep cycle, you've got the major cycle, which is you start sleeping. Let's say you go to bed at 8, 9 o'clock. You wake up at 5, whatever. Within that cycle, you've got multiple sleep cycles. Now, these sleep cycles typically last from around about an hour to an hour and a half. That's one sleep cycle. And then it's got its own stages. An intermediary stage where you are sort of transitioning into sleep, and then you sleep, you dream, then there's a wakeful in between. So you actually wake up multiple times during the night. Most of us don't realize it. We typically have developed a sort of a mechanism to put ourselves back to sleep. Children don't have that. Infants, they don't know how to put themselves back to sleep. So infants will wake up, they'll cry, they are confused, they don't know what's going on, it's dark all of a sudden. So, you have to sort of wake up with them and put them off to sleep. Now, each of those cycles is very important because it has a direct relation to your brain. So when you're entering this wakeful stage, your brain is slowly engaging the rest of the body in terms of coming to a moderately wakeful state, in case you're going to wake up completely. And then you fall back to sleep, the brain goes into shutdown mode again. It closes off the general functionality of wake up, mostly to do with the limbs and your limbic system in this case, and your major organ functionality. Because part of sleep, by the way, is only for the soul, primarily. It is to recharge the soul. That doesn't mean the body doesn't experience sleep. It benefits from sleep as well, because it's a chance for the body to heal itself as well. Now, if you do this 90-minute, if you break that 90 minutes or 1 hour cycle, it's going to trigger the brain into thinking that you're waking up. And so your brain is going to enter into a wake mode. And if you try to put yourself back to sleep in that short interval, you've broken the 90-minute cycle. You try to put yourself back into sleep in that short cycle, the brain is going to start a new 90-minute cycle. And so this is going to disrupt your sleep pattern. This is why you're having a restless night. Even though you got 8 hours, you had a restless night because your circadian cycles were not aligned. They were not synchronized. I know. No, I understand what he's asking, yeah. Now, this is where people who wake up in the morning and they like to hit the snooze button with the alarm. See, when you hear the alarm the first time, you heard it, right? Your sense was active. You heard it. Your sense is the final point of your wakeful state. So if you heard the alarm, you're awake. But if you hit the snooze and go back to sleep, your brain is starting a new 90-minute cycle. Now, if you did a snooze cycle of, let's say, 10 minutes, you're actually breaking that 90-minute cycle. Your brain is going to start a new cycle. You do another snooze of 10 minutes, you're breaking the cycle. Your brain starts a new cycle. This is why you're tired the whole day. This is why you're exhausted, because the brain has registered an incomplete sleep cycle. Just scroll back to his up on the thing. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to do it right now. That's fine. Yeah. Okay, now that broke my train of thought. What was the
cycle thing?
Snoozing.
Pressing the snooze button and then it's reset.
Yeah, I was saying, Sheikh, I was asking, does the timing of the dreams matter?
Yes.
Like, for example, okay.
Yes. So that timing is very crucial. It's incredibly crucial. Now you will never be able to get it at the exact moment, but finding the right timing is very, very crucial. So it's important for you to maintain a circadian cycle that is habituated. So even if you stay up late, let's say you're working, you're up late and you're working, it is important that you wake up at your normal wake time, even though you're sleep deprived. And do not try to break your cycle by sleeping 3 or 4 hours during the day to recuperate, because it will affect now the rest of your cycle as it continues. Those intermediary pieces of 90-minute gaps that you go through during the night, Those are vital. Now, to synchronize that is very hard to say. Ideally, the best synchronicity is to synchronize it with the timings of Salah. So the Prophet ﷺ had that. He used to sleep right after Isha, and then habitually after a 3 or 4 cycles, he would be awake for tahajjud. And then he would probably get another 2 cycles and he would be up for Fajr, like that.
What he's asking is, does the timing of the dream correlate with the trueness of the dream, the authenticity of the dream?
The authenticity can happen at any. No, in most cases, it will happen.
Young, so it's wrong, we hang off, it's right before Fajr.
Yeah. In most cases, it will happen just before Fajr
But
time.
is that true?
It is true, yes.
Correlation between the true-
Yes, it is true. It is true. In fact, the most lucid state of dreaming you will experience is during that time. That's why the dream is the sweetest at that moment. And it's also why it's difficult to wake up for Fajr for most people. Because the dream is so strong. But yeah, it's typically around that time.
Dream that you have that dream,
Mm-hmm.
that dream is not that of good, you know. I hope you understand.
Yes, you can even get, you can. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the timing of the dream was perfect, but maybe the dream, can we discuss like the dream that we have, or it's not a good thing to discuss dreams?
I wouldn't recommend it, but
Okay, all right.
but if it's a bad dream, like, so it depends on where you are when you are in the sleep state. Are you?
In a sense, like
Yeah.
not that bad. Like I don't think it was like a demonic sort of dream.
Yeah.
Maybe someone is dying or something like that is happening in a dream. So what do you think, Dave? If someone is very close to you is dying in a dream, and you are the one, because you are not a Sufi or anything, and you are the one who is being, doing his that prayer, that funeral prayer. Someone is asking you to do that prayer for that person.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the dream. Actually, someone maybe have like today, after a couple of hours, the Fajr prayer. So that was like a bit confusing things,
Yeah, this is the thing about the nature of dreams is like that. So you wouldn't really know. It could be something that is yet to happen. It could be something that you might not see it happening now. It might be happening, let's say, 10 years down the line. You wouldn't know. It could be something that is reflective of an inner state, something that you are. Like Ibn Sirin in his book on dreams, he gives a lot of different kinds of dreams that are common and the interpretives of those dreams. Experiencing death in a dream is one of those things, but I'm not going to give you the interpretation because it could be a wrong interpretation of that dream. So it could mean that, or it could mean this. It could be something that the jinn are, the demons are throwing on you, trying to confuse you, trying to confound you, typically to prompt some sort of reaction from you as it relates to the person that you saw in the dream. So it's hard to say in this case what exactly the dream would mean.
So it's better like not to talk about it.
That's what the Prophet ﷺ, that's his recommendation. If you have a bad dream, it's best not to talk about the dream. And if you had a good dream, you can speak about it, but it's better to not speak about it. In either case, because here's the thing about dreams, it's a very private thing. Like you can't experience dreams of somebody else. Like you are experiencing your own dreams. It's a very private thing, right? And it's also not good to ponder too much on them. Like you're sitting and pondering over your dreams, and it's also not good to do that. If you didn't get it like within the first few attempts at trying to determine what a dream is, it's best to let it go, because trying to rationalize a dream in your wakeful state is the most difficult thing you can do. It's like holding water in your hands. Within a few minutes, that water is gone. You can't rationalize dreams because they don't occur in a rational environment. No. وإياك. Come again? Tim has a question? Yes, Tim, go ahead. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Before you left, I wrote a question that will we have a lesson regarding magic, seher? That was the question first. And also there's in the group also I was interested, why do we forget the dreams after we wake up?
Okay, so for the first question, if you would like to have a session on that, we can arrange for that, um, but not part of the class. We'll have to do a separate arrangement for that. At least a couple of, I mean, because it has its own thing and people will get nightmares. So it's very tricky. It's one of those fields that I have studied, and that's why I've never actually written a book on that subject other than to write it in a form of a story, which is the amulets of Sihr that I wrote, to sort of whitewash it a little bit. It can cause distress on. So if you do want to have a session, we'll organize one, and if we have a good number of individuals who want to attend, Saif will organize a session, and we can have a separate thing for that. Right? What was the second question?
Why do we forget dreams?
Okay, yeah. So the reason why we forget dreams is because it's transpiring in an irrational world, and then when you wake up, you are immediately hit by information coming in. So as soon as your senses are awake, the brain begins to process what information is being received by the senses. So as far as your intellect goes, its primary focus is now going to be on the interpretation of that information as opposed to the dream. So because as soon as you wake up, one of the first things you will do is to determine the time. You want to know what time it is. And then you want to know exactly where you are. If you are in an unfamiliar place, it will cause you distress. These are questions of orientation, time and space, right? The when and where questions, time and space. So your senses are immediately trying to acquire information as it pertains that to ensure that you are mentally oriented to the correct time and the correct space. While your brain is interpreting that or processing that information, your mind is occupied with that. Your mind is occupied with so many other things that are lined up for the day now. You're thinking about what you're going to have to do next. What are you going to have for breakfast? Is it right? Do you have enough time? Is there traffic? What's going to happen? I have to do this work. So you're already engaged in the physical material world, and so the dream is just fading off.
You remember the dream, but then when you wake up content, happy.
Yeah, you could have this. That's what a ru'ya salihah will typically do. You'll see a dream, it's a true dream, a sound dream, and you will probably not remember what the dream is, but you will wake up with this sense of calm and serenity, this real happiness that you cannot really pinpoint. He's going to talk about later on about this inspiration that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has got no articulation in the tongue of man. Right. So I think it's going to be in the next session. We'll look at that, or the following one. Yeah. Yes. Any other question, team? I see Mujahid's hand up. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Yes.
Hope you're all. So I had a question. Apologies, I was in and out of the session because of work, so I may have missed it if you did mention it. So my question is regarding, sometimes when you're for example, you're taking a shower or something, you're in a very relaxed state, let's say, and sometimes you get ideas at this point. That's one example. And another example is like when you're in salah itself, when you're standing in prayer, sometimes, I don't know, it feels like sometimes you get ideas or thoughts in your mind at this time. Can you describe the state that you're in at this point? Obviously, is it a fully wakeful state? And
yes.
Is it an advisable state to be in as well?
Yes, it's a wakeful state, but you're getting ideas at that time primarily because as far as physicality is concerned, you're not actually exerting mental effort. So the task that you're performing is what you would call a menial task. And that's why your mind is able to do that. So if you're getting ideas while you're praying salah, your mind is actually not in salah. The shower, because first of all, there are no distractions. You're in the shower box, right? And it's a menial task. You don't actually think while you're showering. You'll get ideas, and typically you also get ideas in other, like when you're brushing your teeth, or if you're cooking, for example, or you're cleaning the house, you're mopping the floor, when you're doing things that are called menial tasks, that tasks that are already intuitively functioning. Like I used to be a mechanic, and when I became good at certain tasks would take like 2-3 hours to perform. I could do those tasks without really exerting mental effort. So that was the time for me to think now. While I'm doing the job, my mind would be elsewhere, right? But you're getting ideas at that point because your mind is actually not thinking. It doesn't have to exert mental effort insofar as now this material reality is concerned. It has a moment now to sort of formulate thought. That's why you're having those ideas come in at those kind of times. And you'll find it's not only restricted to the shower or something like salat time. It's any time when you find yourself whereby you don't have to exert mental effort in what you're doing. Like if you're in an accountant, for example, you're doing data entry. I don't know if people actually do that anymore much, but if you're doing data entry, your mind will wander because it's a menial task. All you're doing is punching in numbers. Your mind can actually think about other things. And same goes for any other kind of job. Oh, yes, sorry, there's a question here. Why do men have superiority complex in front of their wives? How can a wife protect herself from feeling inferior or getting an inferior complex? Typically, men are in that sense, like, this is a sensitive subject because my wife is sitting right here. Men have a sense of superiority because, number one, it's there in the Quran also that men do have a slight sense of superiority. And it's not to demonstrate superiority. It's because men have been selected as protectors of the women. And that's a true thing. Today it's become a really heated debate in the public sphere especially. It's even coming into legislation now about all this feminism and women's equality and all these things, which is a very strange thing that is transformed in our age. But men do have that because, yes, number one, men do have an advantage in physical strength. That's a given fact. Number two, men do have an advantage in logic and rationality over emotion. And that does not mean that women don't have an advantage in either of those. Women do have an advantage in emotion as well. And women do have an advantage in those attributions, in their own. This is why the union of man and woman is not 1 + 1 = 2. It's actually 1 + 1 = 1. It's very interesting mathematics there because the union is one complementing the other. It's like yin and yang. You have a complete circle out of those two halves. But the problem arises when either or takes advantage of the position that they have. See, even women can develop a superiority complex. It's not necessarily that only men will develop one and women will develop an inferiority. Women do develop a superiority complex, and men also do develop an inferiority complex. In a marital relationship, it will typically be one to the reaction of the other. If the man develops a superiority complex and becomes an authoritarian in the household, then the woman or the wife in this case will react to that by then getting inferior. This is where the whole oppression argument comes in, a woman being oppressed in her own household. And the reverse is also true. If women develop a superiority over their husbands, then as a reaction, the men will feel inferior. They'll just go quiet. They'll just be like, okay, whatever, this is life for me now. So it's balancing off. Why do they have that? You can't really pinpoint a because of this or because of that specifically. It also goes back to their own upbringing, their own background. Men who have actually grown up in a sense of superiority themselves, going through their childhood and their teenage and their adulthood, this is who they are, right? Because by the time you reach the age of maturity of marriage, it sort of becomes a part of your personality, and that's what you're going with into a marriage. And that's a really bad thing to do because, and this is just my opinion, to come in with that sort of a mindset, that sort of an attitude and a demeanor, and then worst yet, to justify that from scripture, to say, oh, you know, such and such hadith, oh, men are supposed to do that, oh, you see, like this and like that. This is where you get all these problems. I mean, I've seen this prevalent in a lot of the Indian subcontinental communities. They sort of have this thing about, this is where the persona of, or the oppressing their women comes from, really. And then you see the same thing like in Saudi. I mean, those who have lived there can attest to this kind of a mindset. And then again, you get the reverse effect from the other side. You get the other extreme now. I mean, now you've got this whole new age movement whereby women are starting to come up and say things like, oh, I'm not actually supposed to serve you. I'm not supposed to clean for you. I'm not supposed to cook for you. I'm not supposed to take care of your parents, according to Sharia, according to fiqh. Yeah, sure. Why do you manipulate that to give yourself a sense of superiority? Why are you in the marriage in the first place? You're supposed to work together. It's not supposed to be follow my lead, you know? And the other one says, no, follow my lead. I'm the one who is this. No, it's supposed to be working together. So again, it's more sophisticated, it's more complicated. You can't actually pinpoint. Hope I answered that question. Yes, go ahead, Tim.
Ustad, one more question regarding when shayateen possess or attacks the body in dream state. Do they really take control over the body, or they just trigger their ghazab and shahwa?
In the sleep state, like in the dream state, they'll go straight for the
Yes,
aql.
in the dream state and in general.
In mostly in general aspects, they will attempt to trigger the shahwa and the ghadab, mostly. That's the easiest thing for them to get to. But in the sleep state, while you're asleep, they will go straight for the aql. Because remember, the ru'ya, the thing that you're seeing, the vision, the dream, is being experienced by the aql. It's the aql that's seeing, and then it's the aql that's drawing this interpretive of the dream. So they'll try to attack that because that's the strongest thing that you have. Your intellect is, by the way, your intellect is your strongest and also your weakest. And its strength is to do with its connection to the heart, and its weakness is to do with its connection to the shahwa and ghadab. So in the wakeful state, they will try and attack the weakest points, which are shahwa and ghadab. And then in the dream state, because you're detached from the body, so shahwa and ghadab don't mean anything. Like what materiality are you going to experience without your body? You can't eat food, you can't drink, you can't be intoxicated, you don't have any of those. So they will try to attack mostly the intellect and what it is seeing. Like they will try to manipulate the projections that you are seeing in the dream, to falsify that, or to give you their own projections. Whether they're trying to implant an idea in you, or they're trying to twist and turn something, whatever it is that their agenda is. Which, by the way, goes back to the other question from, was it Numan who asked about a dream within a dream? I know you probably got that from that film, right? What's it called?
Inception.
Yeah, with DiCaprio.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
don't know about the. I heard about the film, but I didn't. Yeah. So again, if you say I can, I have mentioned it in a comment. Someone mentioning the movie name Inception. So I've replied here, like for example, if you are in a dream and you see yourself awake and doing your zikr or maybe something, and there are your colleagues or your partners. Like maybe there are 6 of them and they all are sleeping and they aren't awaking. And it is a time to awake. It's maybe a sense, you know. Maybe it makes sense or it don't make any sense.
No, it makes sense, but you wouldn't call it a dream within a dream. It's a state within a state. So you've got your wakeful, then you've got your sleep, then you've got your conscious, then you've got your unconscious, then you've got your subconscious, then you've got your vegetative or your comatose state. So it's like, you know, you're going further and further away from any sort of conscious ability. You're not getting annihilated per se. Like you're not going into non-existence. You're still in existence, but you're just further and further away from a conscious existence. So you're sort of experiencing this in layers. That's what you would call a dream within a dream. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Can I ask another question? It's maybe not with this subject. If you don't have any other
what was Tim's question? Did I answer your question or did I break it off? What was your question again?
Yes, you answered, but I wanted to clarify as regarding possession. So they do not really take over control of the body. I mean, in
No,
general,
not full control. Yeah, not full control like that.
Because when I hear most people say, oh, he's possessed by jinns or shayateens, so he's crazy. It's like because of the shawa and ghazab or other mental, let's say, problems there for.
Well, the idea of possession, like junoon, for example, right? That's an insanity. It comes from the same word as jinn. So the Arabs used to like, so somebody is possessed, like it's taken over your mind, or it's taken over, it's made you insane. So I mean, this is going into now the subject of jinn and sorcery. So we'll put that off for another day. But they will attempt to take control of your body. They'll typically try to settle in the brain, because the brain gives them access to the rest of the body. So they'll be able to take over your speech. So you might want to say something as far as your soul is concerned, but then the words coming out will be something else. Or you'll be looking at something, and so you'll probably be looking at this, but then the jinn will manipulate that information so that it looks like this to you. So this is where like hallucinations and things like these come in. They'll manipulate the information coming into you and manipulate the information coming out from you. That's the best case in a successful possession is concerned. And that's very rare, because it requires a demon of high ability. They have ranks, right? In their communities, they have ranks. So a lower rank will probably not be able to. There'll be adverse effects. There'll be weird things going on. The speech will be slurry. It won't come out properly. Something will go missing. They'll be in and out. A little bit of Quran will upset the individual. Powerful demons, like it's very difficult to, like the person who's doing ruqya has to have such strong iman. Otherwise, it won't have any effect on those, no matter how much recitation you do. We'll talk about this in another session. It's a completely different thing by itself. Yeah. Yes, from the chat. Okay, so Numan, let's take a question from the chat, and then we'll come to you. Okay, inshallah. Go ahead.
True knowledge should always be something to embrace and be innately happy about. However, in these current times when even Muslims are operating in a predominantly materialistic way, sometimes beneficial Islamic knowledge has an effect of isolating us from those who are close to us. Sometimes I try to test the waters and see if others are open to receiving beneficial knowledge. But if they show signs of irritation, I leave it for the time being, because I would rather wait till there is a higher probability of the knowledge being received positively. Hope is always there to connect on a deeper level, but often the world feels like it is becoming increasingly smaller.
Well, yes, this is part of the age that we're living in, and it's good that you're able to see that, because a lot of people do not see that. That's a much more deeper reality of this time and age that we're living in. Guaranteed, the more you know about reality, the more alone you're going to feel, the more isolated you will feel from the world. You will, definitely. Now here's the thing, if you look at somebody else and you're trying to help them understand something, there are several things that you see. You can't just do an info dump on individuals, on people, and expect them to just all of a sudden be enlightened. You can't. You have to have a systemic approach in which you're going to help them. That you have to give. You don't give a thirsty person an entire jug of water. they'll just gulp down and then a bulk of that water is just going to spill off, right? It doesn't help them. You give them half a glass and then they drink that. And then you ask them if they want more. You give them another half a glass and then they drink that if you want more, like that, bit by bit. And then they'll be full. Then you need to have some time has to pass where that water is processed. And then they'll be thirsty again. Then you give them another half glass. Like this. It's going to take time. You cannot do an info dump on individuals and expect them to be suddenly enlightened and know everything now. So far as, because there is only so, first of all, attention span of people is very limited. I think they did a statistic and it has dropped down from 12 seconds average worldwide to about 8 seconds average. That's a huge decrease in human attention span. It is one of the cause of stupidity in our age, according to scientists, not according to AbuBilaal, according to scientists. From 12 seconds of a normal attention span to 8 seconds, which means you're dealing with people who already have limited attention spans, who already have preconceived notions, who have preconceived understandings of reality. So you're basically trying to tell them that everything you know might be false. I have got the truth for you, or the right thing for you. How do you convince those individuals? They will already, put up a block and reject that and negate that. So hikmah is the only weapon, your best approach in this case.
Want to change and would want to detach.
Yeah.
We will have to accept.
Yeah, people will not want to, because one of the interesting things about our age is this age is the advent of the Antichrists. And the advent of the Antichrist entails that everything that you know about reality that you're engaging with is sourced from either one of two, from a source of purity or a source of vile and evilness. And all this stuff that we're looking at, this technology and everything, cannot be said to have come from a divine source. All the luxuries and the comforts and everything that we're accustomed to, which we have for many decades justified, not even decades, for now almost centuries, that we have justified to be halal. So people will not be willing to change that easily. They'll not be, because it entails sacrifice. Here's the thing, the more you know about true reality, the more of this false reality you have to let go. In other words, the concept of sacrifice is not yet fully realized in many people. So it's not going to be easy for anyone to convince anyone else insofar as the reality that we're dealing with. It's a very difficult affair. Yeah, take into consideration someone like myself, how much it has taken to present this whole thing in a rationalizable way. The number of books, the number of lectures, and take into consideration someone like Sheikh Hamza Yusuf or Imam Zaid Shakir or Sheikh Imran Hussein, and the years of lecturing and teaching that it has taken them to barely even scratch the surface with a majority of people. Like a majority of people, it just doesn't penetrate through to them. So it's not an easy thing, it's a difficult affair. Anyway, that's a different discussion. Go on.
How the deep sleep differs from suspended state? Do you have some relation with the sleep cycle?
The deep sleep is something that you would probably regard as like something like REM, the REM cycle, random eye movement. Is it random eye movement? I'm very tired right now, so these words are going to escape me. The REM cycle, that's your deep sleep now. Deep sleep can also involve your subconscious state, what you would call a subconscious mind. That's not been this is more advanced now. This is what you would now study in like level 3 or 4 or something of psychology. So that's what deep sleep is. Your suspended state is your intermediate, is your in-between. You're partially awake, you're partially asleep. And that's why you're able to realize that you're dreaming. And you also have some access to your brain on this side, your rational instrument. Remember, that's what the brain is. The brain is the component, your computer, that you process rational data. So you have access to the brain in one side, and you have access to this dream reality on the other side. You've got the best of both. So you're able to sort of, make sense of what it is that you're seeing or experiencing.
Thinking cannot be stopped, but could be diverted.
Yes.
So why do we forget the dream?
So your intellect is always active. We'll talk about this next week, inshallah. Your aql is always active. You cannot stop the aql from thinking. It's just that it will either be thinking productively or it will be thinking in idleness. And some of those thoughts are useful thoughts, but many of those are just useless thoughts. They just don't benefit you in any way. But I answered the reason why you don't remember your dream. It's because when you wake up, you're immediately exposed to this world, and so the noise begins, and so you're immediately diverted from thinking about the dream that you just experienced and to focus more on the reality that's now manifesting in front of you, this worldly, wakeful reality. That's also why Ghazali says that a lot of people actually give this more precedence than that. You know, they give the wakeful reality more precedence in terms of understanding than the dream state. I mean, ideally, it would be good for you to actually give your dreams a bit of thought. When you wake up, when you're in this process of waking up, it's a good thing to try and give your dreams a bit of thought, work it out, and just try and see how it applies to your psychological state.
If we do not interpret our dream, how could we take advantage of it? It seems something really important, but have no control.
Yeah, that's something that's it's a difficult thing to, because it could be that what you saw in your dream was really crucial to you, to your spiritual state, to your psychological state, and then but a lot of people are actually able to make sense of their dreams. They just don't give it much thought, or they give it too much thought. They try to over rationalize it. They don't give it much thought, or they give it too much thought. But part of you seeing the dream it's not a message that's being delivered to you. People think that seeing a dream is, you're getting a message from the other side. You're getting information coming. It's not for that. It's for the soul to heal itself. The reason why you're seeing the dream is indicative of your wakeful state. So the soul is actually healing itself. And the parts of the soul, they will actually be staring at you right in the face. Those components, they don't require too much interpretation. You can actually figure it out by yourself. You just give it some thought. Mm-hmm. Yes. Whose hand is up? Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Roshan or Tim. Is it Tim? No, it's not Tim. It's Numan. Yes. Mm-hmm. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Mm-hmm.
First time I can speak now.
Mm-hmm.
I was always in a noisy environment. Before I go to sleep, I could go put myself in a state, I finish all my prayers, and I'm doing dhikr on my bed to make myself fall asleep. I try to imagine things that I have done that give me pleasure and also pleases Allah during my days, and that way I fall asleep easily. But often what happens is I have desires that pleases my nafs, but that doesn't please Allah,
Mm-hmm.
that interfere with my falling asleep and keep me awake.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the same time, I notice that before I fall asleep, my body goes into a detoxification state, right? And when it does that, most of the time I lose wudu, so I'm not in a wudu state anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at that point, when you're about to fall asleep and you don't want to wake up and make wudu again, that will kind of disturb your sleep and
Yeah.
will make you take more time to fall asleep. Especially water, gives
Yeah.
you sense of
It will
cold
wake you up.
and you're
Yeah.
warm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you want to be warm when you go to sleep instead of going into a cold
Mhm.
state again.
Yeah.
Now, what do I do?
I mean, you don't have to get up again to do wudu. Like if you took wudu and you already, here's the thing. It's a debate as to when a certain thing actually starts. Does it start when the action of it is performed, or does it start when the intention of it is made? So, I mean, I believe something like sleep is not, you can't really pinpoint when sleep actually starts. It's very difficult. Even with the latest of instrumentation, they cannot determine when an individual actually falls asleep. So you took your wudu, you made your niyyah, you're already in your bed and you're already doing your adhkar. So you're already getting into sleep. You just haven't moved from the wakeful state into the sleep state itself. Like there are things that, as you said, are still bothering you. They are keeping you from falling asleep. And that's because your mind is highly active. You're going through thoughts and attempting to rationalize those thoughts before you go to sleep. And that's what's preventing you from actually transitioning. Because if your mind is highly active, especially when it is attempting to rationalize, see, anything that you try to rationalize employs the use of the brain. So if your mind is active trying to rationalize, your brain is also active. If your brain is active, that means your senses have to be active. And so you have a very hard time falling asleep. So this is a practice that you will have to go through to try and avoid doing that. This is why you find many psychologists, psychiatrists, neurologists, they'll give you all these tips and tricks, things like avoid screen time before sleeping, a half hour or 1 hour before sleeping, avoid artificial light or reduce the amount of artificial light. Things like those, things that will at least reduce the amount of neural activity before going to sleep so that you can easily fall asleep. Otherwise, if you have high neural activity, it takes a long time for that to subside. And so if you're thinking a lot of things, then that's keeping your brain active, and it'll make it difficult for you to fall asleep. But you don't need to wake up and do wudu again. Wudu is not a requisite, by the way. It's not a hukm that you have to have wudu for falling asleep. It's just like a recommendation. It's something that you do because you want to be in a state of purity. That's it. So you don't have to have wudu to go to sleep. Just so you know, by the way. Yes, go ahead. Next. Is it from the chat or is it? Yes, Numan.
Yeah, Jazakallah Shaykh. Sheikh, the question that I have, first of all, I would like to say sorry because my English is not my first language, so
no,
I
it's okay.
make, some mistakes, all the time.
It's okay, it's all right.
Basically, this is the book written by Imam Ghazali, The Alchemy of Happiness, right? So, is alchemy of happiness is the same thing as achieving the marifa? Because there are a lot of other philosophers in that era. Like for example, if we see the Sohrawardi, the philosophy of illumination and the things like that. So because they all are going to the same thing, I think. Like they are on the way up the tasawwuf, and at the end they are finding that thing, the marifa, okay?
Yeah.
So is it the same thing that if we follow the alchemy of happiness and find ourselves in a state of tranquil, so we are going to find that marifa that might be, yeah. Please go on this.
Yes. So marifa, Imam al-Ghazali's idea here, his alchemy here, is to say that first of all, the one thing that the human being is existentially in search of. Existence is to be found. This is why you have the same word, wajada, yujadu. Existence is to be found. We found existence. There was existence and then we were brought into existence, so we found existence, right? We saw everything, we came in, this is what we saw, right? Now, in this state of finding, what is it that we're actually looking for? Ultimately, there has to be the one thing that gives us true happiness, is what he says. So we are essentially looking for true happiness. This is what you would call the pursuit of happiness. So this is what Ghazali is saying. In order to achieve sound tranquility, you need to achieve contentment, which is true happiness. How do you find that? And Ghazali's argument is that you will not find it in any other source except in the presence of the Lord Almighty, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because everything in creation is relative. He is the only true and absolute. In order to find happiness, happiness has to be absolute. Otherwise, if happiness betrays you, it goes away. then it wasn't happiness to begin with, right? And so you'll only find true happiness in the absence of the one and true. So this is his alchemy then, to say that if you want to find true happiness, you need to seek out the divine presence. But this is where the problem comes in. You cannot see the divine presence. You can't see him while you're existent in this world. You'll only see him after you die, after, when he's resurrected you. So what's the closest you can come to him? What's the closest you can come to know the divine presence? Your grandfather has passed away. You've never met your grandfather. You've seen pictures of him maybe. Let's assume that photographs weren't invented. You've never seen your grandfather even in an image. What's the closest that you can come to him in terms of love and affection? It is through knowing him, right? Your father will tell you stories about him. Your mother, maybe your uncles will tell you, this is how he was. This is the kind of person he was. And the more you come to know him that way, the more you have love and affection for him. So that whenever he is mentioned, you feel a sense of happiness. So that's the love of one for a created thing. Now, amplify that to the love of the creator. You cannot see him. You believe that he is there. You believe that this is where you find your happiness. How do you come to find that divine presence? Through his knowing. Through knowing him, and that's the ma'rifah. So what Ghazali is saying essentially now, this is the alchemy. In order for you to find contentment, you need to be in the divine presence. In order for you to be in the divine presence, you need to have ma'rifah. That's the alchemy, in a nutshell.
Okay.
No.
Jazakallah, Shaykh.
No.
Why are some dreams clear and some we can't remember?
I believe we answered that already.
Some are clear.
Yeah, because some will be based on your spiritual state to get your clarity or obscurity, the state of the heart. Others will depend whether you are in a state of lucid dreaming or you are in a state of, let's say, it's just a projection of the mind, or it is just information that is being processed. Like if you're somebody who has been punching numbers the whole day, as an account, for example, you'll probably see a whole bunch of numbers just going round and round in circle, and there's no clarity to them, right? So some will be true dreams, which will be the clearest dreams. Others will be projections from the demons, which will be very confusing. So it will vary. The reason why some are clear and some are not depends on various factors. Your own psychological state, your spiritual state, and then what sort of dream you're experiencing, and in what state of the sleep cycle that you are in.
Not sure if this has been shared before, since the subject is about dreams. Umar ibn Zubayr reported, Aisha radiallahu anha would say when she intended to sleep, "O Allah, I ask you for good and true dreams, not false dreams, beneficial and not harmful." When she said this, they knew that she would not say anything more until she awoke in the morning or in the middle of the night.
Yes. You can find that hadith. I think the source is there.
Sahih according to
Yeah.
the
There are many different du'as like those that you can recite. Those are the adhkar now. Those are the
When
reminders.
someone utters something blasphemous before sleeping, they might experience something that they describe as heaviness on the chest, suffocation, and strangling. Is it angels or warning from Allah or demons?
It could be multiple things actually. That's an interesting question, because you could be affected by a jinn as well. That there is a type of jinn that loves doing that. It gets drawn to vulgarity, and it enjoys suffocating you in your sleep. It's just fun for it to torture you doing that. But part of that could be also something like you're experiencing something like sleep paralysis. And it's good to do a bit of research on that and read up on that. You could be experiencing sleep paralysis. It could also be a sense of khawf, like a psychological trauma. You just woke from a deep sleep, and that sudden wakefulness and sudden return. Because, by the way, when you're shifting between the states, it's a very gradual thing. It's not like a switch. It's a very gradual thing. Now, if you disrupt that and you make it abrupt, it can actually cause you psychological trauma. So if you wake somebody up from a deep sleep and they just suddenly wake up, this everything like information is suddenly flooding into them, it can cause them trauma, and it can give you this sense of this feeling of being, constricted. like you're feeling like loss of breath or something of that nature.
Do you have any thoughts on the relationship between deja vu and dreams? Deja vu seem to be an intersection between the past and the present, like a memory of the present.
Mm-hmm.
Does it not indicate a temporal, therefore ethereal distortion of some kind?
Okay, so deja vu is a very interesting thing. Who's asking that? Safe. Please ask this question next week's session when we talk about the intellect. But I will give you a heads up on that. Deja vu, by the way, to understand, it's a real thing. It does happen, but not in the way that has been described to happen. So ideally, I would advise, first of all, to get rid of that word. That term, just get rid of it. That's a pseudo term. It doesn't come remotely close to actually explaining what this phenomenon is. But inshallah, next week when we speak about the intellect, please remind me and ask this question again. And actually it's a very interesting thing. We'll talk about this next week, inshallah.
So waswasa happens in shahwa and ghadab?
Waswasa happens from the sadr, the sadr of the human being. So your sadr, your breast, inside your sadr is the qalb. Your sadr is the protecting element, like in the same way that your rib cage, your chest here protects your organs entire, your vital organs, your lungs and your heart. So what the demons, they try to do, fi sudurin nas, they try to throw it on the sadr. Right? Now, they hope that this is going to go. Now, the kind of whispering they do is they try to trigger the shahwa and the ghadab. If the nature of the individual, the soul, is ghadabi or shahwani, or they're just driven by the self, this is where the complex comes in. If they have a superiority or an inferiority complex, then it's going to, whatever whispering the demons throw, it's going to trigger those aspects. Because the sadr is the inroad of information from external sources to inside. Whatever information comes in, if it is not processed by the intellect properly, which is ideally what it should be, the intellect should be the one to decide what information goes where and how it is interpreted. If instead it is the shahwa or the ghadab that does that, then yeah, it's going to prompt a reaction in the individual.
You said one component of knowing is time.
Mm-hmm.
In case of recurring dreams, is it possible that dreams of a child would manifest their meanings in present years, like even 30 or 40 years?
Yes, it's very possible, because you can experience a dream in your childhood and it's constantly been coming up, but then you only now recently in your 30s or 40s now begin to understand what that dream meant, because part of knowing or conscious realization is a component of time. This is why an individual is called mature in the sense of saying, you've gone through life, you know more than in colloquial speech, you'll say you've been around the block. You see, you're a bit more wiser insofar as world reality is concerned. So there's certain things that you couldn't rationalize as a child, you will be able to rationalize them now. And maybe that dream is part of that. You couldn't make sense of it when you were a child. You're seeing it, or you've been seeing it for many years, and now you're finally able to make sense of it. Time plays a fundamental component in knowing and conscious realization. This you will understand, inshallah, when we do Imam al-Haddad's texts and we go through the ages or the stages of man.
What is the difference between waswasa and possession?
Waswasa is external. So it's waswasa can be from min al-jinn wan nas, from jinn and from mankind, but then, and this is mostly like information that is being targeted for a specific purpose, to cripple the other individual, to cause them distress, to prompt a reaction, things like those. Possession can only be done by jinn. It cannot be done by man. Man cannot leave one body and then enter another body. Each individual is designed with their own body. Each, by the way, this is a very interesting thing, because part of the modern agenda is all this whole transhumanism thing going on. Or you can download consciousness and put it here and put it there and put it in the cupboard and all this nonsense. Stupidity. The arguments sound very rational, right, when you look at them. So a lot of people actually get deceived by that. But one thing you have to remember is that each body is uniquely designed for each soul. So any soul cannot take on another body. Each body is unique. This is why the wajh, the face, is your mark, is the mark of your existence, the signification of your existence. It cannot be taken by anyone else. That's why each individual has a unique fingerprint, has a unique ear pattern, has a unique dental configuration. These are unique attributes for each individual, right? So one person cannot take over the body of another. Possession is done then in this case whereby the entity that has got no physical attributions, which is the jinn, can enter into a material object like the body, and they can inhibit themselves in different parts of the body, and they can live dormant in the body for years. Someone can have a jinn in them for decades, their whole life, and not even know it. It's possible. But it depends on the intent of possession. You see, there are different aspects now. There's possession done willingly. Like you angered a jinn or something, you went, this is why you say don't throw hot water on, in just random places. Don't just go or wander in areas whereby, it's deserted or isolated, like deserted buildings and things like these, where it would be typical for jinn to reside in those kind of places, because you could enter into a place where it is a jinn's, personal space, or harm its children or something like that. And then out of that reaction, the jinn can attack you. Now, again, we're going into this discussion, sorry. We'll come to that in a different session, inshallah.
Since jinns have free will, do they have psychological and philosophical structure and understanding as we humans have?
Yes, they do have a psychology, and then they do have a formulation of thought. Philosophical, that's the formulation of thought, wondering. They do have that, but they have it in their own way, not in the same way that we humans have. So think of it this, they have their own realms, they have their own structures of governance, they have their own sharia. They don't follow human sharia, which is interesting because you could be if you harm a jinn, you can be taken to be judged by their laws, and it's happened documented in the past. Somebody had actually done that, and he had to be given up. Like he had to be taken by the jinn to be judged per their law. They have their own structure. They have their own knowledge per se. The way these. So anyway, now again we're getting into the wrong discussion. We don't have time right now for that. Go on next.
Some dreams can be caused by results of various information overflows that take place in our day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
A few years ago, Google introduced a program called Deep Dream,
Mm-hmm.
which essentially leverages deep learning, accessing mass amounts of data
Mm-hmm.
using neural nets, and is able to create archetypes of images.
Yes.
Like we as humans may see shapes in random clouds.
Mm-hmm.
AI was able to extract images out of random and disparate data, albeit not using the same mechanism. Do you think AI could have any kind of dream?
Yeah, no, I mean it depends on now again the definition of dream. That's why I said it in the beginning. The kind of definitions that these people have, they're very misleading in terms of that reality, because AI or any kind of artificial instrument will only develop information, right? It's not knowledge. You have to understand that it's not knowledge. It's information and the manipulation of information or the processing of information. Dreams are not based on information. Dreams that we experience, ahlam. This is why it is very important to stick to the terminology that are used in the science itself, in the science as far as Islam is concerned, not as far as these people are concerned. If you look up the definition of dream in all modern dictionaries, whether it is just colloquial language like the English dictionary, or look it up in any psychological textbook, you get some very weird definitions. You get some very strange definitions that if you examine, they will seem very innocent, and most people will drink those definitions, but when you examine them in the lens of Islam, through the lens of Islam, they are very misleading, because part of their agenda of giving these kinds of definitions is to actually delineate your thinking from a metaphysical, spiritual reality to something that is just. It's just the brain's function. It's just neural network. It's just unconsciousness. Oh, it's just the brain, whatever. Subconscious is just a part of the brain. See, mind and brain, by the way, now in modern definitions, is the same thing. The same thing, mind and brain, you're talking about the same thing as far as the English language and their sciences are concerned. So you have to be very careful. This is what they're trying to present to you. Part of this whole AI agenda, in my view, and I could be wrong, Allahu A'lam, this is tied in directly to the advent of the Dajjal. Whether it is the Dajjal himself manifest, or it will be something that he will use as a tool, as an instrument to enact his fitna. But it's directly tied into that. So anything that is produced from this whole AI thing, all these Muslims, these stupid Muslims, going in and starting to do this chat GPT nonsense and coming up with all these stupid things from this, you can do a fatwa from this, and you can have a discussion about hadith with it, and then you can ask it to process images based on what the hadith is saying. You people don't know what you're playing with. Honestly, you haven't got no idea the kind of things that you're toying with, because while you're doing all these things with AI, it's reading you. You think you're smart when you're doing all these things, engaging with it. The reason why they may put it out there for free usage is so that it can gather information about you. You're not studying it. It's studying you. It's learning you. Every word you type into those devices, it's learning you. The more info, and they have more information about you than you have about them. You don't even know what that AI is made of. You don't know the source code, and you cannot read it, you cannot understand it. But it knows you inside out. So all you people engaging in this thing, I could be wrong, but what do I know, right? I've just been studying these things for the last 10, 15 years. What do I know? But I could be wrong. Anyway, you can have your fun and enjoy AI and everything, and do your pictures and everything, whatever it is that gives you delight. Have fun with the Dajjal. I don't care. But it's going to destroy you. Because the way it is being presented to you is that the way your understanding of reality is now going to be based on the way they project that understanding. So, like the clear example in this case, the way Saif is saying it, you see, what do they mean by dreaming? How do you put that into perspective to say an AI is dreaming, or the computer is dreaming? See, it's formulating these images based on information or data that is, in the background, something that is in the computer's subconscious mind. They'll use all these terminologies to make it look like it's human. Really, and a lot of people, part of this whole AI advent, this ChatGPT thing that they brought out, and then the next versions that they're coming up with, by the way, they're making it free because it's part of the testing. It's called the Truman test, I think it's called. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that. It's called the Truman test. It's a test to see whether or not, when a human is interacting with the artificial intelligence, the human is not able to distinguish its artificialness. If I'm butchering it, but that's the idea, is that you as the human interacting with the artificial intelligence is so that you get convinced that it is not artificial, that it's human. Anyway, well, that's a different now.
Would you say something like seeing two bright suns in a dream?
No, I'm not going to get into that. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to get into the interpretation of dreams. But there are many explanations, and like I said, it could mean something to one person, but it could mean something else to a different person. So I'm not going to give you an interpretation on that. I'm sorry, because I'm going to end up deceiving you if I do that. Yes, go ahead.
Sidi, I think you may be referring to the Turing test. Right?
Turing test, yes, not the Truman test. The Turing test. Alan Turing is the one who, essentially, during World War II, I believe, came up with the computer system that cracked the Enigma, the German codings. As essentially, artificial intelligence is sort of owed to those roots, where a computer can look at a code and then interpret it and come up with a solution of it by itself without having any user input. But that's why it's called the Turing test. So you interact with the AI, but then you are convinced that it is human. It's displaying empathy, it's displaying emotion, it's displaying This is why we said, insofar as human psychology is concerned, these are all externalities, they're not internal. Emotions and feelings and all these things are inhibitions or exhibitions of your true internal state. It's not real psychology. So don't get deceived by these things. The Dajjal is going to appear most the saint when he's going to appear a saint when he's going to be playing most the devil. Anyway. Anything else? I'm seeing something coming up on the chat. Can you check, please?
Sidi, there's a new name for ChatGPT in the Islamic age. I don't know if you've heard it. It's called Muslim GPT.
Acha? Well, there you go. I mean, now what do you tell these people? Seriously, how much do you knock on their heads until they realize it?
What do you think about Ibn Sirin's Tafsir al-Afterlife?
That's the book, that's the text I was referring to, Ibn Sirin. That's the scholar. I mean, there's controversy about that. There's some people who claim that he didn't write that book. It's just attributed to him. I don't know. It doesn't, I don't like to get into all if there's a consensus in which the scholars say that that's his book, then I accept that. But it's an excellent kitab, really, Ibn Sirin's book. But you need to, you can't study that by yourself. You need a scholar to study that with that text. And you need to study it in the Arabic language because of terms. If you apply modern terms, English terms, it will confound your understanding of the concept itself. You have to understand it the way the scholar understood it when he was writing the text. So you need to study it in Arabic with a scholar who has already studied the text himself.
There's some viral videos where there's two suns in real life.
Yeah, this is all part of the manipulation. You've got deep fakes, you've got all these things that, I mean, I've seen people posting things like UFOs and all these kind of things, and it looks very convincing, but I don't know. We live in a very strange world. Anyway, I think let's end for tonight. We've gone way overboard our normal time limit. So we'll stop here for now, inshallah, and convene next week. سبحانك وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين بارك الله فيكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته جزاك الله خيرا جزاك الله everyone.
وعليكم السلام جزاك الله.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.